Phoenix Nights. Chapter 2758 Destiny's Hostility. Chapter 2758 Destiny's Hostility. The Ordinary Sword. Yan Yi hadn't truly attained the realm of the ordinary sword because both him and the sword precursor's attainments weren't sufficient. However, had comprehended the essence of the ordinary sword, so all he needed was a fortuitous encounter to accomplish it. Of course, that wasn't the most important part. The most important part was that his mind was clear, and he understood everything. Yan Yi waved his right hand, and the sword precursor turned around and returned to him. A moment later, a blood-red woman appeared before him. She gazed at him, and then the blood red on her gradually faded. A short while later, she was normal again. Yan Yi smiled. "Congratulations." She shook her head, didn't say a word, and just transformed into a sword that entered the sheath on Yan Yi's waist. Companionship. She'd been by his side for countless years, silently staying by him. Yan Yi chuckled and vanished on the spot. Outside the primordial pagoda, Yan Yi arrived at a hall. It was known as Universe Hall, and it was the most authoritative hall in the entire three-dimensional universe. A single command from her would be obeyed and executed by countless worlds and powers. There was a figure working in the hall, Ding Xiaoyao. Ding Xiaoyao could be considered as the busiest person in this universe, because she had to manage too many things. In the beginning, the others doubted her ability, but because she had been recommended by Yang Yi, no one said a thing about it. However, they gradually started to be won over by her. She was a truly capable person. Besides that, the power that stood behind her and the bodyguards Yang Yi gave her made her an overlord in the city. Even though the universe was united on the surface, there were still numerous powers in the city. It was something unavoidable. Ding Xiaoyao glanced at Yan Yi and continued her work. Yan Yi walked over to her, and she was reviewing something. Meanwhile, Ding Xiaoyao said, "There are too many things to do in this universe. I want to establish a department, an independent department, and then recruit people to help with all of this. We don't need strong experts for this, and even ordinary people can do it. However, they must have status and protection. Do you have any objections?" Yang Yi smiled. "Of course you can." Ding Xiaoyao nodded. "I've already given the order. Besides that, there are some empires and kingdoms throughout the universe, and while they have agreed to yield to us, we can't really interfere in their internal affairs, nor do we dare to interfere. After all, if our people don't act neutrally, it may bring a calamity to the empire or kingdom in question." She looked at him and asked, "What do you think?" Yan Yi fell silent for a short while and replied, "How about we don't interfere in their internal affairs? However, we will supervise them. Remember, we're only supervising, not interfering. If any empire or kingdom is too chaotic, we still must not interfere immediately. A request should be made here, and then someone should be sent to investigate. In the end, the final decision will be made here. What do you think?" Ding Xiaoyao pondered deeply for a moment and nodded. "All right." She gazed at Yang Yi and continued, "Everything is almost over, right?" Yang Yi nodded. "It should be." She fell silent. Yang Yi turned around and walked outside. He gazed at the entire city. Presently, the entire three-dimensional universe had been organized, and it was time for it to all be over. Bang! Suddenly, an invisible wave of pressure appeared in the city. At this moment, everyone here was shocked and looked up. A sword gradually descended from above. A dark green sword. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly when he saw it. Justice! It was the strongest form of Destiny's sword, Justice. Yan Wu Jianwudi and the others appeared in front of Yan Yi, and Yan Wu spoke solemnly. "That's the other sword of destiny, the strongest one. Brother Yang." Yang Yi spoke softly. "Just stand on guard here and don't go up there." As soon as he finished speaking, a ray of sword energy shot up into the air. Countless looked up at the sword energy from within the city. Worry! After experiencing times of war, everyone in Eternal Kingdom had learned to cherish this peace that didn't come easy. Especially now when the entire universe was living in harmony, and the spirit energy here was abundant. No one wanted to lose all of this. However, they were all well aware that the young man who just shot up into the sky was the one who was maintaining it all. He set the new rules, a brand new order. If he died, this world would be back to square one. Even Yen Wu and the other Destiny Realm experts were extremely worried. If Yang Yi died, they would naturally be the strongest experts here. However, once Yang Yi died, this group of theirs would lose its foundation. Even if they didn't disperse immediately, problems would definitely arise sooner or later. So, even they didn't want anything to happen to Yang Yi. He was the only person who could maintain the order of this universe. In the sky, justice was still descending slowly while an endless wave of aura descended with it. If the sword went just 300 m lower, the entire city would collapse. Sword aura. Head witnessed the auras of the woman in black and the woman in white, and had experienced Tuss aura as well. However, none of them were as strong as this. It seemed like the aura could destroy everything. Yang Yi gazed at the sword with indifference. A wave of invisible sword intent and pressure suddenly swept out from him, and then it stopped the aura emanated by justice. At the same time, his sword left its sheath. A sword howl resounded, and a sword stabbed against the tip of justice. Boom! The sky shook violently, and then justice was forced to a stop. Suddenly, justice shook, and then the sword precursor crashed down from midair. Yang Yi stretched out his hand and it firmly entered his grasp. Yang Yi looked up, and a woman was standing above justice. A woman in a dark green dress. The strongest form of destiny. While she seemed material, it still wasn't her main body. She looked down at Yang Yi while a bright smile still lingered on her face. You're showing signs of attaining the ordinary sword. You've surprised me a little. Yang Yi took a step forward, and he instantly arrived before her. He looked her in the eyes and said, I'm sure you're not here just to sightsee. So, what do you want? She grinned, glanced at the city down below, and said, You're quite capable. You actually gathered all of these people and powers together. Unfortunately, it's meaningless. Why is it meaningless? Yang Yi replied with a question. Don't you think it's all quite nice? She smiled. Yang Yi, oh Yang Yi! You think everything is so simple. Do you know why all of you can live peacefully in this universe? It's because we are holding off the pressure from the outside. However, all of you are full of hostility toward us instead. For example, you want to kill me, and they want to kill us. Tell me, aren't you repaying kindness with enmity? Yang Yi shook his head. My intuition tells me that you aren't protecting the three-dimensional universe. She was unlike the others. The woman in white and the others were definitely wholeheartedly protecting this universe. But the woman before him felt like she wasn't someone who cared about the universe and all those who lived in it. Once someone like that attained a certain level of strength, their thoughts and actions would differ from ordinary people. She gazed at him for a long time and grinned. It was quite a moving smile. She said, You're right, but you get nothing for that. Yang Yi fell silent for a moment and said, The universe is gradually stabilizing, and it's starting to develop in a good direction. So, can you let it be? She shook her head. If it wasn't for me, this universe would be gone by now. I'm only protecting it because it's a little useful to me. She gazed at Yang Yi and continued, It'll give you a chance. Want to hear it? Yang Yi nodded. Tell me about it. She smiled. The chance is to give me the good sprite and evil beast. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. You're already so strong, so why do you want to do as that mysterious expert and rely on other living beings to strengthen yourself? She shook her head. No. I don't want to use their strength, I just need something. This thing lacks a sprite, and I think they will make the perfect combination for it. Yin and Yang, heaven and earth, malevolent and righteous. I have all of those. I only lack good and evil. However, they are still quite weak, so I'm willing to wait. Yang Yi looked her in the eyes. It'll kill you. She smiled, and it was a very calm smile. She shook her head. A very, very long time ago. Too many people had the same thought as you. For example, Qi Bitian and Yang Busi, who you think are very, very formidable. No, they actually can't be considered to be formidable. There are those who are even more formidable than them. All of them were of the same mind as you. But what happened in the end? As she spoke, she walked over to him. Do you know why I didn't kill some people? It's not that I couldn't kill them, it's because it would be too boring if I did. Yang Yi fell silent. She looked down and chuckled. Since all of you are hostile toward me, it's fine, you can feel my hostility too. As soon as she finished speaking, she waved her right hand. Justice shot up into the air. Hiss! The sword tore through the sky. An instant later, it seemed like something was being sliced open. A moment later, everyone's expressions changed. There were 9 heavens which represented the 9 layers of space. But at this moment, along with justice shooting up into the air, all 9 layers of space were sliced into bits. Meanwhile, numerous mysterious eyes soundlessly appeared where the 9th layer of space had been. These eyes looked down at the 3-dimensional universe. However, they seemed to fear something and only dared to look yet didn't dare to come closer. She gazed at Yang Yi. That's the barrier I once set up for the 3-dimensional universe. Now it's gone. So, let me see how all of you protect this universe now. Yang Yi looked her in the eye. From this moment onward, we will protect the 3-dimensional universe. As soon as he finished speaking, Yang Yi looked down and howled with fury. Send word to the entire universe. Everyone who can fight better get themselves to Universe City. Let's show this woman that we can still survive even without her. 62C5B2942708FD12A9 add 975E. Chapter 2759 Giving Orders to the Universe. Chapter 2759 Giving Orders to the Universe. Ding Xiaoyao immediately took action. Sending orders to the universe. If it were in the past, it would be a joke. Yet now, a single order from Universe City could be sent to the entire universe in a short amount of time. In the air, the woman grinned as she gazed at Yang Yi, and then she looked down. She was like a god looking down on the living. Yang Yi didn't say anything and just left. It was pointless to say anything now. She didn't attack Yang Yi either. She shot a glance to the lower right, revealed a grin that seemed to carry deep meaning, and then left. Just like that, she vanished in the sky while countless watched. At the direction Shed looked at earlier, an ethereal shadow soundlessly condensed into form. It was the mysterious expert from the End World. The mysterious expert looked in the direction Shed left toward and fell silent. Shu Wubian and the others were by his side. Shu Wubian looked into the sky with indifference on her face. It's her! The mysterious expert nodded. Shu Wubian said, She's even more unfathomable now. The mysterious expert remained silent. Zwen Mu and the others were looking in the same direction as well. Destiny. That woman was the strongest form of destiny. Even though it had just been a clone of hers, their hearts had trembled before that glance of hers. She was unfathomable like the boundless universe. That was how she felt to them. A short while later, the mysterious expert said, Her target is the good sprite and evil beast too. We can't allow them to fall into her hands. Otherwise, we won't have a chance. Shu Wubian spoke indifferently. Shall we act now? The mysterious expert shook his head. Let them exhaust their strength for now, and we'll attack when they are at their weakest. Meanwhile, Zwenmu suddenly asked, Will the 3-dimensional universe be destroyed? The mysterious expert glanced at him, and replied, If Destiny stops guarding that space, then they won't be able to protect this universe. Zwenmu fell silent. A short while later, all of them vanished. Universe City. In the hall, all the experts led by Yang Yi had extremely solemn expressions on their faces. Yang Yi spoke solemnly. I'm sure you witnessed everything. So I won't say anything else. Will you protect this place or not? Yes. An old man suddenly stepped forward. They gazed at him, and he spoke solemnly. We have no way out. If we leave, the entire 3-dimensional universe will be finished. Or to explain it in a more selfish manner, The three-dimensional universe is our territory now, and it's our final territory. Because we can't escape this three-dimensional universe, nor do we have the strength to do so. They nodded to display their agreement. They definitely had to protect the place, and they had to protect it to the death. Because if they chose to flee, Yang Yi would definitely leave. At that time, they would die a worse death. Conversely, if they chose to stay, they would have a better chance at winning with Yang Yi's help. All of them had lived for countless years, so they understood everything clearly. If they left and Yang Yi chose to stand by idly, then all of them would die. Meanwhile, Yang Yi said, "Since we are of the same mind, let's do this. Send word to the universe for all Destiny Realm experts to assist us. They can choose to refuse, my universe city must keep a record of them. Those who refuse will be prohibited from entering Eternal Kingdom for life. I won't force anyone to help, but they can dream of ever coming here." Yang Yi wasn't someone who liked to force others, and his attitude was very clear. He welcomes those who wish to help, and those who didn't could choose not to. However, they could dream about reaping the rewards once the battle was over. The Destiny Realm experts cared about Universe City because the spirit energy here was effective toward them, of course. The spirit energy in other places couldn't satisfy the needs of a Destiny Realm expert, and it could be said that they had to come here if they wanted to grow stronger. The others agreed with Yang Yi's decision. If people couldn't fight and go through the difficult times with them, why should those people share in the rewards of their efforts? A short while later, orders were sent from Universe City. Meanwhile, Yang Yi, Jianwudi, and all the other Peak Destiny Realm experts left Universe City and went up into outer space. They saw some eyes in the distant reaches of space. Living beings that didn't belong to the three-dimensional universe. Destiny had destroyed the 9 layers of space with a swing of her sword. Now, there was no barrier between the 3- and 4-dimensional universes. It could be said that the 3-dimensional universe was fully revealed before the 4-dimensional universe. However, those eyes were clearly afraid of something and didn't dare to come down here. Yang Yi knew that those existences feared Destiny, and once they understood what Destiny was planning, it would be the moment they entered the 3-dimensional universe. They are very strong. Meanwhile, Jianwudi spoke solemnly. They are at the peak of the Destiny Realm at least. Our forces may be unable to stop them. Yang Yi nodded. Had fought those eyes in the past, and the joint forces of Nanjing and himself hadn't even been able to kill one. Of course, Nanjing and him didn't have to fear them now. However, the other Destiny Realm experts of Universe City didn't have a good chance against them. Jianwudi gazed at Yang Yi. What is your plan? Yang Yi replied softly. I don't have one. If they attack the 3-dimensional universe, all the living beings of this universe will die. No one will survive. So, if you want to protect everything you have, the only way is to fight. Jianwudi nodded. Then we shall. Yang Wu smiled. Our luck is pretty bad. My Martial Sky clan just entered the world again, and we've encountered something like this. The past life clan's patriarch chuckled. Actually, it isn't entirely bad. If we're able to overcome this danger, it'll be like a form of rebirth for all our clans. Yang Yi nodded and smiled. Don't be too pessimistic. In any case, we just have to fight. Don't think about anything else. The others smiled. Suddenly, a figure shot over from the distant sky. Jianwudi and the others were about to attack when Yang Yi hurriedly stopped them. He gazed at the figure, and it didn't take long for that figure to arrive before him. Yin Yang Goddess! Her countenance was quite pale, and there was some anxiety on it. Yang Yi was quite surprised. What the heck happened to her? She gazed at Yang Yi. That woman appeared. Yang Yi glanced at her with a strange look in his eyes. Did you encounter her? She replied solemnly. She glanced at me. Yang Yi was at a loss for words. Yin Yang Goddess shook her head. She didn't attack me, but she looked at me with disregard. She disregarded me. Her face was rather ferocious when she spoke up to this point. Yang Yi. You can attack her if you don't like it. Yin Yang Goddess gazed at Yang Yi. Am no match for her. Yang Yi felt speechless. If you're no match for her, then isn't it good that she disregarded you? Do you want her to insist on killing you? Meanwhile, Yin Yang Goddess suddenly said, Did she come for you? Yang Yi nodded. Yin Yang Goddess asked, She didn't kill you? Yang Yi's face darkened, and then he pointed upward. Do you see that? She shot a glance upward and nodded. I see. Yang Yi spoke seriously. We need more help now, so stay and help us, alright? Yin Yang Goddess didn't refuse, but she didn't say anything in response either. Yang Yi knew he had a chance. Yang Yi hurriedly added, Senior, you don't have anywhere to go now anyway, so why don't you stay in Universe City? Of course, you can leave whenever you want. She glanced at him and said, Alright. Yang Yi grinned when he heard this. Yin Yang Goddess wasn't an ordinary Destiny Realm expert, so it was a great thing to have her join Universe City. Yang Yi restrained his thoughts and glanced at the others. All of you head back. Jian Woody frowned slightly. What are you doing? Yang Yi looked up. I'm going to go have a look. Jian Woody shook his head. That's too risky. Yen Wu and the others hurriedly nodded. Yang Yi was like their pillar of support, and if something were to happen to him, everything would be over. Yang Yi smiled. Don't worry, I won't be rash, and they can't make me stay if I decide to leave. Jian Woody was about to say something, but Yang Yi spoke first. It's fine, I know what I'm doing, Jian Woody said. The others can head back. They'll go with you. Yang Yi thought for a moment and didn't refuse. Yin Yang Goddess suddenly said, I'm coming too. Yang Yi gazed at her and she said, I'm really curious about those eyes too, and I want to have a look. I can, right? Yang Yi smiled. Of course. Just like that, the three of them shot up into outer space. Yen Wu and the others returned to the city. At the center of Universe City, Ding Xiaoyao led area, Snowy, and in Nanjing behind Shindozi to an empty space. Snowy and Area hadn't gone with Yang Yi because Snowy had to help Shindozi with the formation. Of course, in order to keep Snowy safe, practically all the Destiny Realm experts in the city were on guard in the surroundings. Besides that, Area and in Nanjing were personally protecting her too. Snowy was the most important right now, and no one would allow anything to happen to her. Shindozi withdrew a pitch-black plate, and he spun it. A moment later, a huge circle of blue light appeared in the empty area, and there were countless threads moving within the circle. Shindozi gazed at Ding Xiaoyao. I'm going to perfect the formation now. Ask her to give me spirit energy, the more the better. Ding Xiaoyao nodded slightly, and then she gazed at Snowy and smiled. Little fellow, it's up to you now. Snowy blinked, withdrew a black gourd, and then passed the gourd to Shindozi. It was the gourd shed taken from the mysterious expert from the End World, and there was a huge amount of spirit energy within it. Shindozi took the gourd and glanced at it. A moment later, his hand trembled because there was so much spirit energy in it. Suddenly, Snowy looked to the side. At practically the exact same moment, Area stood in front of Snowy. At the same time, over 20 Destiny Realm experts appeared in front of them. All of them acted like they were facing a formidable opponent. A woman had appeared there. She glanced at Snowy and smiled. Little fellow, you're really amazing. Snowy blinked, and then she waved her paws to say something. Yang Yi spoke solemnly. How did you get injured? The woman pointed upward. Yang Yi immediately understood. The woman in white added, I came because I wanted to ask you for my sword. I'm at quite a disadvantage without a sword, and you seem to have found your own sword now. So, past life isn't very helpful to you anymore. Yang Yi gazed at her. Do you need my help? She shook her head. Protect this place well. Well, help you stop the relatively stronger fellows out there. Yang Yi asked, Aren't you afraid of annoying her? The woman in white smiled. We aren't. In any case, we're all the same person. Even though we have independent thoughts right now, we are still the same person. Yang Yi laughed bitterly. If only she was as easy to talk to as you are. The woman in white shook her head and smiled as she shot a glance at outer space. She destroyed the barrier she set up all those years ago. If I'm not wrong, what she seeks is almost in her grasp. Of course, the important matter at hand for you is to face those existences from the four-dimensional universe. Yang Yi asked, "Can you tell me about them in detail?" He didn't know much about the four-dimensional universe. All he did know was that it was a universe superior to the three-dimensional universe. The woman in white pondered deeply for a moment and said, "The living beings of the four-dimensional universe are actually greater than the living beings of the three-dimensional universe. They evolved earlier than us, and their overall strength is naturally stronger than ours. However, my complete form entered that universe in the past, and I killed many experts in that universe. Later on, I split myself into four because I was a little too strong. So, unless I left the three-dimensional universe completely, my main body would be enough to destroy the three-dimensional universe." Yang Yi asked, "Why didn't you leave?" She looked up and said, "I don't know either." Yang Yi frowned. "Impossible," she replied softly. "Our strongest form is up to something, and it's something that made her willing to split herself into order to weaken herself. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, she should have sealed off some key memories within the rest of us." Yang Yi spoke solemnly. "What does he want?" The woman in white shook her head. "I can't see through her either. All those years ago, even the three-dimensional universe couldn't stop my peak state, yet she stopped." She gazed at Yang Yi. "No matter what she's planning, I think it should be done soon." Yang Yi laughed bitterly. "I just happened to have run straight into it." The woman in white patted Yang Yi on the shoulder. "Remember what I told you. Our merged form is our strongest form, but she's still strong even if we don't merge." Past life shot forward like a bolt of lightning. Boom! An explosion resounded, and then past life was instantly blasted away. Meanwhile, justice didn't slow down at all as it shot toward the woman in white. She waved her right hand, and past life appeared in her grasp again. But this time, past life trembled violently and was covered in cracks. The woman just silently gazes at justice with indifference. Meanwhile, Yang Yi was about to attack when she shook her head to stop him. Just like that, Yang Yi watched as justice came closer and closer to her. Meanwhile, she suddenly pressed her sword against her forehead, and then she stabbed forward. It was a very ordinary stab, but it carried the strength to destroy the world. Even Yang Yi, someone who'd attained the quasi-ordinary sword, shuddered slightly before it. However, justice suddenly stopped at this moment. A moment later, the woman's pupils constricted. Hiss! Justice shot through the woman's chest. A strand of blood sprayed into the air. Chapter 2761 Reunited. Yang Yi's expression changed drastically at the sight of this, but just a moment later, the injury on her chest healed rapidly. Meanwhile, justice didn't attack again, and it just floated there quietly. A short while later, a voice resounded from far away. "Step foot into the world again and it'll take your life." As soon as she finished speaking, justice transformed into a ray of light that vanished into the distant sky. Meanwhile, the woman in white gazed at Yang Yi. "I'll help you keep away some of the stronger experts on the outside. The rest will be up to you." She vanished into the distance once she finished speaking. Just like that, Yang Yi watched her vanish into the starry sky. Yang Yi fell silent for a while, and then he looked toward the direction justice had vanished. She actually refused to let the woman in white enter the three-dimensional universe. Yang Yi's face was extremely gloomy. What did she want? What in the three-dimensional universe was worth all of this? Yang Yi couldn't figure it out. Yang Yi turned around and left. Suddenly he stops moving and turns around. A towering giant was dashing toward him from nearby. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly upon seeing the giant. Obviously, it was formed from those mysterious eyes. They had probably sent the giant as a probe. Firstly, to probe Destiny's attitude toward things, and seconds, to probe the three-dimensional universe's strength. So, when he thought up to this point, Yang Yi suddenly walked toward the giant. Meanwhile, the giant's gaze descended onto Yang Yi. A moment later, a powerful wave of pressure slammed down upon Yang Yi. Suppression with aura. However, this aura was like a breeze to Yang Yi, and it didn't affect him at all. Suddenly, Yang Yi vanished on the spot, and an afterimage flashed. A moment later, a ray of light appeared above the giant. The giant swung its right hand at the ray of light, and the space in the area rippled before it. A moment later, the huge hand had struck the ray of light. However, it failed to sweep apart the sword energy. Conversely, it slashed down and slashed off the giant's arm. The sword continued downward and slashed all the way down from its head. Yang Yi sheathed his sword at the giant's feet and walked away. The giant behind him suddenly split apart, an instant kill. A short while later, a voice resounded in the area. Investigate him. Yang Yi returned to Universe City. As soon as he did, Jian Woody and the others came to him. All of them heaved sighs of relief when they noticed that he was fine. They had noticed the sudden turn of events, and they had planned to go to Yang Yi. However, Ding Xiaoyao had stopped them. As far as Ding Xiaoyao was concerned, if even Yang Yi and the woman in white couldn't keep themselves safe, then all of them would be just going there to give their lives away. Yang Yi said, "Have any Destiny Realm experts come here?" Ding Xiaoyao replied solemnly. "One did." "One?" Yang Yi's face fell. "Are there no more, or are they unwilling to come?" Ding Xiaoyao replied softly. "According to my knowledge, there should be a few more, but there may not be many. However, I'm afraid they won't be coming. Because the war between Eternal Kingdom and the Desolate Race was the best time for them to show themselves and take advantage of the situation. But they didn't show themselves then. Obviously, they are either in closed-door cultivation until they attain a breakthrough, or they don't want to get mixed up in any trouble." Yang Yi nodded. "Since they refuse to come, it's fine. We'll deal with this ourselves." He glanced at Yen Wu and the others. "Go make the necessary arrangements and prepare to enter battle at a moment's notice." They nodded and left. Yang Yi went to the city center with Ding Xiaoyao, and they met Qindozi there. Yang Yi said, "Brother Qin, please speed up the work on the formation." He needed to use all the strength available to him. Qindozi was clearly aware of the city's situation and nodded slightly. "It'll speed things up, but I need some help," Ding Xiaoyao said. "It'll get you what you need." Qindozi nodded. "That would be perfect." Yang Yi left with Ding Xiaoyao. On the way, Yang Yi spoke solemnly. "Help me look for some people," she asked. "The girls from the Nether Pavilion?" Yang Yi nodded. "Investigate their whereabouts." He suddenly stopped at this point because he was slightly hesitant. He really didn't want to drag them into this. They had really suffered because of the battle against the Soul Sect. Ding Xiaoyao spoke softly. "I know where they are." Yang Yi gazed at her, and she smiled. "They contacted me. They said that they will come, but they will be late." Yang Yi shook his head and smiled, and he felt warm inside. Ding Xiaoyao continued. "Besides them, there are some others." "Huh?" Yang Yi gazed curiously at her. "There are others?" She nodded. "Some old friends." She suddenly looked to the sky. "They should be here." As soon as she said that, numerous sword howls resounded outside the city. Sword howls. A moment later, a few dozen rays of sword energy entered the city. Obviously, Ding Xiaoyao had informed the others of their arrival, so no one stopped these rays of sword energy. A few dozen figures arrived before Yang Yi. Yang Yi was stunned when he saw them. The disciples of the Ancient Sword Sect. They were actually the disciples of the Ancient Sword Sect, and they were led by Elder Shui, Gu Nie, Lu Yunxian. All the survivors of the Ancient Sword Sect were here. All of them bowed to Yang Yi. "Sect Master!" Even though practically all of them were sect masters, as far as they were concerned, Yang Yi was the true sect master of the Ancient Sword Sect. They were the sect masters before their disciples, but they were the disciples before Yang Yi. Yang Yi shook his head slightly. "What are all of you doing here?" Elder Shui smiled. "It's the most dangerous moment for our three-dimensional universe, so how can we not come here at a time like this?" Gu Nie smiled. "Elder Shui is right. While we aren't that strong, I believe that we'll still be useful." Yan Yi chuckled. If you're here, what about your sex? Gu Nie replied. You don't have to worry about them. We've made the necessary arrangements. Yan Yi gazed at them, fell silent for a short while, and then spoke seriously. Don't worry, I'll send all of you back the same way you came here. Gu Nie smiled. Since we've come here, we've already disregarded our fate. Yan Yi felt rather complicated emotions in his heart. These people before him couldn't be considered as weak, but they really weren't strong enough when compared to the enemies they had to face now. However, they had still come. They knew they may die, but they had still come. Not for benefits, but for loyalty. For some reason, as he gazed at the excitement on their faces, Yan Yi had a strange feeling in his heart. Emotion. Love between family wasn't the only type of emotion in this world. There was friendship, brotherhood. The Tao of emotion encompassed everything. Yan Yi restrained his thoughts and patted Gu Nie on the shoulder, and then he said, Come. Let me take you to see a senior, and you can learn well from him. As he spoke, he led them to Jianwudi. Yan Yi grinned upon arriving before Jianwudi. Martial ancestor, they used to be part of my sect. Right, they can be considered your grand disciples too. So give them some guidance, alright? At this moment, Yan Yi wasn't acting like the person who established the new order in the three-dimensional universe, nor did he seem like the governor of Universe City. Something worth mentioning was that Yan Yi was the governor of Universe City that everyone tacitly acknowledged. Jianwudi glanced at Yan Yi's shameless antics, shook his head, and sighed. Seriously. He gazed at Gu Nie and the others. All of you can stay. As for how much you learn and comprehend, that depends on your own luck. Gu Nie and the others hurriedly bowed respectfully to him. Even though they didn't know who he was, Yan Yi was so respectful to the old man and even addressed him as martial ancestor, so how could he possibly be weak? The smart move was to grab a hold of this opportunity. Yan Yi was relieved to see Jianwudi agree. He had been quite worried because Jianwudi was used to doing things on his own, so asking Jianwudi to teach them may not work. However, the facts proved that had been overthinking things. Yan Yi left after leaving Gu Nie and the others to Jianwudi. In the primordial pagoda, Yan Yi returned to the cultivation room, and it was empty. And Nanjing wasn't here. Yan Yi scanned the pagoda with his divine sense, and then he shook his head and smiled. It turned out that Nanjing had gone to teach Arya. Or to be more precise, they were sparring. Not to mention in Nanjing, even he was quite fearful of Arya's current strength. Her physical strength and defenses were more than just a level higher than before. No one could gain an advantage over her when it came to physical strength and defenses. After Arya started cultivating, Snowy started forging her things. Her only interest was forging Yan Yi's treasures by constantly enhancing them. However, some of her strange thoughts almost caused a lot of trouble. For example, merging Heaven Executor with Burial. They weren't the same sword, so they naturally couldn't be merged. But she forced the merge. And then she'd been blasted away by the explosion. Luckily, she was unharmed. Because she would always stay far away before attempting to make them merge. Obviously, she'd realized that something bad may happen. Once swords couldn't be merged, she thought of a new thing. Merging demon beasts. So, the dragon and the others started to suffer instead. Since she'd hit a wall with equipment refinement, it was time for demon refinement. Actually, no one knew that Snowy had unknowingly created a new profession in the future world. A brand new profession. In the distant starry sky, two white figures flashed by. The starry sky shook violently, and then waves of energy ceaselessly surged toward the surroundings. At the same time, two white figures were blasted backward repeatedly. They were pushed extremely far away. A moment later they stopped. One of the petite women wiped off the blood on the corner of her mouth and looked off into the distance. Little Chi, we should be there soon. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2762. I looked down at the clouds. The two white figures were Chi Bitian and Tian Xiu. They were people from different eras, but they had become friends now. They got along very well. Chi Bitian looked up into the distance when she heard Tian Xiu, and she saw some mysterious speck of light in the distant starry sky. Chi Bitian spoke abruptly. I don't think so. Tian Xiu gazed at her, and she explained softly. The four-dimensional universe is much farther than we imagined. See those specks of light? Those specks of light should be their outposts, and the space behind them is the real four-dimensional universe. Tian Xiu nodded slightly. That's fine. Well, just fight them. Chi Bitian smiled. Yes, well, just fight them. She seemed to have thought of something at this point, and shot a glance behind her. I wonder how that kid is right now. Tian Xiu looked into the distance, and a long time passed before she spoke softly. He isn't someone to give up. Trust him. He will catch up, so let's go. Suddenly, a white shadow appeared not too far away. Chi Bitian's eyes narrowed slightly while strong hostility could be seen in her eyes. It was the form of Destiny in a white dress. The woman in white stopped, glanced at them, and said, Advance soon. Our strongest form is targeting him, so his life is in danger. She vanished into the distance once she finished speaking. Tian Xiu asked, Shall we kill her? Chi Bitian shook her head. She isn't like the other forms of Destiny. Calm, she looked in the direction of the three-dimensional universe and frowned slightly. What did that kid do now? Even the strongest form of Destiny is targeting him? Tian Xiu shook her head. He has always been very good at causing trouble. Chi Bitian asked. Should we head back? Tian Xiu asked. If we join forces, can we defeat the strongest form of Destiny? Chi Bitian thought for a moment and shook her head. I don't think so. Tian Xiu replied softly. Then let's advance first because fighting her to the death. Chi Bitian chuckled. All right, let's fight her to the death. I've been suppressed by her for thousands of years. This time, either she or I will die. Ha ha! They vanished into the distance once Chi Bitian finished speaking. Around 2 hours later, they suddenly stopped because there was a battle ahead. It was a woman with a saber. Yang Busi. As for the one in battle with her, it was a woman with a wine gourd. It was too. Destiny. Chi Bitian spoke indifferently. Another one. Tian Xiu clenched her hands slowly. Suddenly, a terrifying aura swept over from afar, and then numerous giants appeared there. There were over 20 of them, and every one of them wore violet gold armor and held a huge axe. They were like war gods as they stood there, and their monstrous auras caused the entire starry sky to tremble. However, they were led by a man. A human man. Behind the man was also a huge demon that was shaped like a lion. Its eyes were dark red like lanterns, and its limbs were like towering pillars that could hold up the sky. The human man wore an ink-black robe and a helmet which looked like cow horns. He had a spear in his grasp, and the spear was a little longer than an ordinary spear. The tip of it was broken slightly as if some kind of sharp weapon had cut it off. Along with their arrival, Tu and Yang Busi stopped fighting, and they gazed indifferently at the man. The man stopped, glanced at them, and then his gaze fell on Tuesday. In an instant, his face became icy cold. Destiny! Tu cracked a smile. I didn't expect the Titans to have a human on their side. Looks like you've sided with them. The man spoke coldly. Kill! As soon as he gave the order, the demon behind him leaped up and pounced at Destiny. Destiny laughed coldly, and then she leaped up and kicked at it. Bam! An explosion resounded, and the demon was blasted backward repeatedly. Meanwhile, a spear suddenly arrived before Tuesday. Tu had obviously expected it because she pressed her palms together and clamped down on the spear. After that, she pushed forward and kicked. At the moment she kicked, the owner of the spear, the man, kicked as well. Bam! They immediately split apart and returned to where they'd been a moment ago. Tu glanced at the man and laughed coldly. You have some skill. The man glanced at Chi Bitian and the others. All of you are experts of the three-dimensional universe, so why are you with Destiny? Yang Busi frowned slightly. What the fuck is wrong with you? Do I look like him with her? The man's eyes narrowed slightly. Do you want to die? Yang Busi gestured provocatively at him. Why don't you try? The man vanished on the spot. Meanwhile, Yang Busi suddenly spun on the spot, and then a powerful aura swept out from her. At the same time, a fist slammed at the man. Bang! Space shook violently, and the figure was blasted back to where it came from. Meanwhile, Yang Busi had similarly been pushed around 300 m back. The man gazed at Yang Busi, and a wisp of solemnness appeared in his eyes. She was very strong, and it made him wonder who these people were. The man glanced at them. In the end, he didn't choose to cause trouble and said, "Let's go!" Once he said that, he led the giants and the demon forward with the intention of going around them, but Yang Busi suddenly asked, "Where are you going?" The man laughed coldly. "What? You want to stop me? You may not be able to." Meanwhile, Tu grinned. "She asked you where you're going." Her smile was quite evil. The man replied indifferently, "The three-dimensional universe, of course." Yang Busi's face instantly turned gloomy. "Oh." Meanwhile, Tu glanced at Tian Xiao and Qi Bitian. "You may not be aware that Yang Yi is the founder of the new order in the three-dimensional universe. He has gathered all the Destiny Realm experts of the three-dimensional universe, and is preparing to fight both the End World and the four-dimensional universe. However, his strength may be a little weak. If these fellows are allowed to go down there, he may be killed." Qi Bitian replied indifferently. "Are you joking?" Yang Busi suddenly said. "She isn't joking." Qi Bitian gazed at Yang Busi, and the latter said, "He's part of my Yang clan, and I just came up from down there." She gazed at Tu. "I'll kill you next time." Tu gulped down a mouthful of wine and chuckled. "Any time." Yang Busi ignored her and gazed at the man. "Let's fight." She immediately charged at him once she finished speaking. The man was about to attack when two auras suddenly enveloped him. His expression changed as he gazed at Qi Bitian and Tian Xiao. He was about to speak when Tian Xiao suddenly said, "Go back to where you came from." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he flicked a pitch-black command token into the air. A moment later, it vanished into the starry sky. "He has called for backup." Meanwhile, Tu drank her wine as she spoke. "Out of consideration for my third and fourth form, I'll give you a friendly reminder. You better hurry up if you want to attack. Otherwise, you may not be a match for their forces soon." "You!" Tu suddenly stopped at this point because Qi Bitian and Tian Xiao had charged forward. Tu shook her head, smiled, and walked away. But she had merely taken a few steps when she seemed to have thought of something and said, "Didn't that fellow attack me too? Wait, I have to get even for that." An afterimage flashed. At a certain point in the clouds, a woman sat before a go board. She held a white piece in her right hand yet didn't put it down, and she was just twirling it between her fingers. She had a faint smile on her lips. A moment later she put the piece down, but nothing happened in front of her. She looked up into the distance. "Play." Her voice carried a trace of an indisputable tone. A short while later, a voice resounded. "You destroyed the three-dimensional universe's barrier on purpose so that we would enter it. However, you definitely did not do that because you're bored. So, tell me, why did you do that? What have you been plotting for so many years?" She chuckled. "You're asking about too much." The voice fell silent. She smiled. "If you don't send your forces, I will come to you." Suddenly, a black piece flew up into the air and shot at her. She clamped down on it with 2 fingers, and then she placed it where it had been. "Don't attack me. I don't think it would take 2 swings of my sword to kill you," the voice replied. "We won't let you use us." The woman grinned. "Perfect." She picked up Justice that was by the board and walked off. She walked in a very carefree manner. She smiled. "In 2 hours from now, nothing will be left alive in the 4-dimensional universe, including you. Would you like to bet on that?" She didn't stop while she spoke. Chapter 2763 Kill Them All. Chapter 2763 Kill Them All. The battle was still going on in this area of outer space. Tu Yangbusi, Tianxiu, and Qibitian had actually joined forces. All of them had a single objective: to stop these towering giants and the man from entering the three-dimensional universe. As far as Qibitian and Tianxiu were concerned, destiny was an enemy, but these fellows before them were enemies too. In the beginning, they fully suppressed the man and those giants. Or to be more precise, the man and those giants were practically only able to defend themselves. Their joint forces were truly too terrifying. But it didn't take long for Tu and the others to suddenly stop. They practically simultaneously gazed at the expanse of space behind the man and the giants. There seemed to be something coming from there, and the space there was rippling. A moment later, 4 huge demons emerged from that expanse of space. They were like wolves with ferocious appearances, and extremely long fangs. Their bodies were huge like rocks, and they even had wings on their backs. Their limbs were monstrous like mountains. Pantheras! Tu spoke abruptly. Qibitian gazed at Tu, but Tu looked up at the endless starry sky above, and there was confusion in her eyes. What are you trying to do? No one else here had a better idea of how terrifying these demon beasts were. Because Shed fought them in the past. All those years ago, her strongest form had personally suppressed that extraordinary expert of the four-dimensional universe. Besides that, Shed slaughtered many extraordinary experts of the four-dimensional universe. The Panthera were one of them. Moreover, because of her strongest form, the four-dimensional universe didn't dare to send experts that surpassed the Destiny realm. Because everyone they sent would be killed. Yet now, 4 had actually appeared simultaneously. Tu was very puzzled. Qibitian asked, "What the heck are they?" Obviously, Qibitian, Tianxiu, and Yang Busi had sensed how strong those beasts were. Tu glanced at Qibitian and said, "Don't let these animals get to the three-dimensional universe. Otherwise, everyone there will die." Suddenly, the 4 beasts emanated 4 monstrous auras toward the woman. Moreover, even the space in a huge area was instantly obliterated. At this moment, all 4 of them revealed solemn expressions on their faces. Tianxiu suddenly said, "Kill them!" Qibitian smiled. "Let's see who kills one first." As soon as she said that, all 4 of them practically instantly vanished on the spot. Meanwhile, the man and the giants didn't interfere. They just swiftly vanished from here. At this moment, Tu and the others didn't have the strength to get distracted and stop the man's group. Just like that, the man led the giants swiftly toward the three-dimensional universe. Universe City. On the ascension platform in the primordial pagoda, a little fellow was hammering something. The little fellow was Snowy, of course. A long time passed before she suddenly tossed away the sprite staff, then she picked up the thing before her and ran off somewhere. A short while later, she arrived at the cultivation room, and she raised a pair of dark golden bracers to Yang Yi. Heaven's shield. Yang Yi gazed at it, and was quite surprised because it wasn't really the same heavy shield he knew. It was much stronger. Yang Yi gazed at Snowy, and she cracked a smile and waved her little paws. "Area!" Yang Yi understood that the little fellow had asked Area for more scales. However, she hadn't asked for them in one go, and she'd given Area time to grow more. Just like that, she kept asking for more until she gradually finished modifying Heaven's shield. Yang Yi rubbed Snowy's head and carried her over to Area's above. Yang Yi walked over to Area and spoke softly. "Area, will losing those scales affect you?" She shook her head. "It won't." Yang Yi spoke solemnly. "Tell me the truth." Area smiled. "It is the truth. Big Brother Yang, I'm not lying. I would have thrown them away even if Snowy didn't ask for them." Yang Yi was quite puzzled. "Why?" She replied softly. "My scales are evolving incessantly, and the previous scales will be eliminated after every evolution." She lifted up her tail and said, "See?" Yang Yi gazed at her tail, and he noticed that the scales on it seemed a little different from her previous scales. Area said, "So, I let Snowy take those scales because they would be wasted otherwise." Snowy hurriedly nodded. Yang Yi rubbed Snowy's head and smiled. I guess I was overthinking then. Snowy cracked a smile and rubbed her head against Yang Yi's palm. Yang Yi gazed at Arya. Arya, have you recalled the past? She shook her head. Why would I? I refuse. Yang Yi was stunned. She spoke softly. Big brother Yang, I like how things are now, and I don't like the past. I'm still me, the past me, and the present me. However, I choose my current life. Yang Yi smiled. I understand. Suddenly Yang Yi's expression changed, and then he vanished on the spot. Arya looked up and spoke softly. Snowy, trouble is here. Snowy blinked, and then her eyes spun about. Now one knew what she was thinking. Arya rubbed Snowy's head. Are you planning something? Snowy blinked, raised a single claw, and drew a circle. After that, she raised another claw and drew another circle. Just like that, she kept drawing numerous circles. Arya gazed at the excitement on Snowy's face and sighed softly. My goodness, I suddenly feel that Big Brother Yang is truly amazing. He is actually able to understand you, Snowy. I truly admire him. Snowy was at a loss for words. Outside the primordial pagoda. Once he left the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi immediately gathered all the experts in the city, and then numerous powerful auras suddenly shot up into the air from within the city. In the sky above the city, Yang Yi and the others looked up into outer space. Numerous waves of pressure were pressing down from above, and the clouds above the city had been fully dispersed. At this moment, everyone in the city sensed a wave of lethal pressure. Yang Yi glanced at the city below before looking up into space. A moment later, he pressed his fingers together and tapped upward. A ray of sword energy shot up into the air, and it was like a bolt of lightning that instantly obliterated the pressure coming from outer space. Countless cultivators throughout the city felt like a burden had been lifted from their shoulders. Yang Yi gazed into outer space. A short while later, a man on a demon beast appeared within their fields of vision. Behind the demon beast was around 20 giants. Jianwoody and the others instantly revealed solemn expressions from the sight of this. They had sensed the auras of those giants, and they were stronger than them. Of course, their gazes had converged on the man. Because the man was a human. A human from the three-dimensional universe. The man sized up Yang Yi's group, and then he shook his head and laughed coldly. After so many years, the three-dimensional universe has really been declining with every era. Yang Yi suddenly appeared around 30 m before the man. The man's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't attack. Confidence. He had the right to be this confident. Yang Yi cupped his fist and smiled. May I know your name? The man smiled. Jiang Jun. Of course, you've definitely never heard of me, nor do you have the right to. Yang Yi grinned. I see, Senior Jiang. I wonder why you're here today, Senior Jiang? Jiang Jun spoke indifferently. Why do you think I'm here? Why would you ask such a stupid question? Don't you think that asking that makes you seem... Suddenly, something unexpected occurred. Yang Yi, who was still smiling just a moment ago, suddenly appeared right in front of Jiang Jun. The explosive force in that instant caused space to be obliterated in his wake. At the same time, a sword descended toward Jiang Jun's head. Explosive heaven rend. The explosive force of this attack and Yang Yi's own strength was sufficient to blast the world apart. As for Jiang Jun, Yang Yi's attack was simply a calamity. Because Yang Yi had taken him by surprise. In battle, the initiative in the battle was very important. However, Jiang Jun was no ordinary expert. At the critical moment between life and death, he reacted instinctively. He instinctively grabbed his spear and raised it before him. At the same time, a wave of powerful energy surged out from him. However, it was instantly obliterated by the energy within Yang Yi's sword, and the sword slashed down. Hiss! The sword instantly sliced through the spear. But the instant of time the spear bought him was enough for Jiang Jun to shoot backward. However, it was still a little too late. Hiss! Blood sprayed and Jiang Jun's body was instantly slashed into half. However, his soul managed to escape over 1 kilometer away. Yan Yi was about to give chase, but a demon beast appeared in front of him. The demon beast slammed its paw at Yan Yi. Yan Yi was about to swing his sword when a petite figure suddenly slammed against the demon beast. Bang! The demon beast was blasted away. It was Arya. Yan Yi sheathed his sword and gazed at Jiang Jun. Destiny refuses to protect this world, but I, Yan Yi, will do it. As he spoke, he looked up into outer space. Destiny, I know you're watching. Just watch and see if I can protect this world. As soon as he finished speaking, Yan Yi suddenly drew his sword. Kill them! Kill them all! Chapter 2764. Just fight. Kill. Once Yan Yi gave the order, Jiang Wudi and the others charged at the giants. Meanwhile, Arya slammed herself against the demon. At this moment, the demon had recovered from its shock, and a ferocious expression instantly appeared on its face when it saw Arya slam herself at it. It refused to show weakness and did the same. Normally, the strength of demons was decided by their main bodies. Of course, there were exceptions. Arya was a huge exception. Bang! A howl of pain resounded, and the demon beast was blasted away again. Arya pressed forward and charged at it again. At this moment, Arya's eyes had gradually turned scarlet red. At a time like this, Arya was the most dangerous, and the most terrifying. It could be said that ordinary people wouldn't dare to approach her right now. Her ferocity had been aroused. The demon finally realized how powerful Arya was, and there was a trace of fear in its heart. However, it didn't flee, and it charged at her again. In an instant, the sky above the city started shaking violently. Suppression. As soon as they fought, Yan Yi's side instantly suppressed Jiang Jun's group. It was because Jiang Jun had lost the ability to fight. Yan Yi's gaze was locked on Jiang Yun. Right when Jiang Jun was about to retreat, Yan Yi suddenly vanished on the spot. Jiang Jun was horrified when he noticed this. He was just about to summon the demon, but a shrill cry came from over there. The demon beast's shrill cry. At this moment, Jiang Jun sensed the aura of death. However, a giant suddenly slapped its palm at Yan Yi. Yan Yi stopped for a moment, and swung a backhand slash at it. Hiss! This slash sliced through the giant's hand, and a moment later, a ray of light shot at Jiang Jun. Always kill the leader first. Meanwhile, the giant from before charged at Yan Yi again. This time, Yan Yi didn't turn back, and the sword gourd on his waist trembled slightly. A moment later, a black sword shot out from it. Burial! The sword shot straight for the giant, and the giant swung its other hand at the sword. The powerful force within the slap caused space to crack apart. However, it was up against one of the sharpest swords in this universe. Hiss! Burial instantly slashed through the giant's arm, and it didn't slow down at all as it pierced through the giant's forehead. The giant's powerful physical defenses were weak as paper before Burial. Meanwhile, Yan Yi had arrived before Jiang Yun. The latter was about to say something when Yang Yi swung his sword. Bam! Jiang Jun's soul was instantly obliterated. Yang Yi sheathed his sword. Meanwhile, Burial automatically returned to the sword gourd. Yang Yi gazed at Arya. She waved at Yang Yi to say that she didn't need any help. She wanted to fight it in single combat. Yang Yi didn't interfere because while she was young, she had the heart of a strong expert. Or perhaps, the pride of an expert. While she wouldn't say anything if he did help her, he hoped that she could defeat it herself. Moreover, he believed in her. Not to mention that demon, even he wasn't confident in being able to defeat Arya. Yang Yi turned to look into the distance, and then he tapped his right foot down. A sword howl resounded. Along with a sword howl, the arm of a giant over 1 kilometer away was separated from its body. At the same time, a black sword pierced through its chest. Bang! The giant exploded into pieces. Right when Yang Yi was about to launch another attack, a divine sense slammed down from afar. Everyone here was shocked. They sensed it, and the aura it emanated felt simply impossible to fight against. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. A moment later, He shot up into the starry sky, and it didn't take long for the divine sense to arrive above him. Yan Yi closed his eyes slowly, and he opened them a moment later. This time, his eyes were blood red. The demonic sword Dao. Moreover, the sword precursor in his grasp had turned blood red. Yan Yi raised it above him with both hands, and then a moment of silence ensued before Yan Yi shouted with fury. Slash! As soon as he said that, he swung his sword with both hands. Hiss! The space before him was sliced open like scissors cutting through cloth. However, the divine sense and its pressure weren't affected at all. Meanwhile, Yan Yi raised his sword again and swung it down. Explosive heavenrend combined with the madness sword technique. Bang! 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 Along with a string of explosions, Yan Yi was pushed back repeatedly. He was pushed extremely far away. However, the pressure had been slashed apart as well. But he hadn't been able to gain even the slightest advantage against it. Meanwhile, the giants fighting against Jian Wudi and the others retreated into outer space. Yan Yi wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth and looked up at the starry sky. Obviously, an extraordinary figure of the four-dimensional universe was behind that. A moment of silence ensued, and then Yan Yi suddenly patted the sword gourd on his waist. A sword howl resounded, and then a ray of light shot up into the sky and chased after the retreating giants. Suddenly, a hexagonal energy shield appeared in outer space. It appeared in Burial's path. Bang! The sword struck the shield, causing it to shake and crack open slightly. But Burial was blasted back to Yan Yi. Yan Yi grabbed Burial in his right hand. Bam! The force that came from the sword caused Yan Yi's arm to crack open. At the same time, he was pushed almost 3 kilometers back. Meanwhile, the hexagonal shield gradually vanished from there. As for the giants, they had vanished. And Nanjing asked, "Should we give chase?" Yang Yi shook his head. "The strength of that person just now is unfathomable. Chasing after them is meaningless. The four-dimensional universe may be very strong, but we aren't weak. Just as this senior here said, so long as we stay united, we still have a chance to win. Just like the previous battle, didn't we win it? Of course." He smiled and continued, "Even if we lose, isn't it just death?" They gazed at him, and he grinned. "We're already at a time like this, so let me be honest. Our goal is to disregard our lives and fight against it all. Fight to the death. Even if we die, we must die with dignity. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters." Chapter 2764. Just fight. Kill. Once Yang Yi gave the order, Jiang Wudi and the others charged at the giants. Meanwhile, Arya slammed herself against the demon. At this moment, the demon had recovered from its shock, and a ferocious expression instantly appeared on its face when it saw Arya slam herself at it. It refused to show weakness and did the same. Normally, the strength of demons was decided by their main bodies. Of course, there were exceptions. Arya was a huge exception. Bang! A howl of pain resounded, and the demon beast was blasted away again. Arya pressed forward and charged at it again. At this moment, Arya's eyes had gradually turned scarlet red. At a time like this, Arya was the most dangerous, and the most terrifying. It could be said that ordinary people wouldn't dare to approach her right now. Her ferocity had been aroused. The demon finally realized how powerful Arya was, and there was a trace of fear in its heart. However, it didn't flee, and it charged at her again. In an instant, the sky above the city started shaking violently. Suppression. As soon as they fought, Yang Yi's side instantly suppressed Jiang Jun's group. It was because Jiang Jun had lost the ability to fight. Yang Yi's gaze was locked on Jiang Yun. Right when Jiang Jun was about to retreat, Yang Yi suddenly vanished on the spot. Jiang Jun was horrified when he noticed this. He was just about to summon the demon, but a shrill cry came from over there. The demon beast's shrill cry. At this moment, Jiang Jun sensed the aura of death. However, a giant suddenly slapped its palm at Yang Yi. Yang Yi stopped for a moment, and swung a backhand slash at it. Hiss! This slash sliced through the giant's hand, and a moment later, a ray of light shot at Jiang Jun. Always kill the leader first. Meanwhile, the giant from before charged at Yang Yi again. This time, Yang Yi didn't turn back, and the sword gourd on his waist trembled slightly. A moment later, a black sword shot out from it. Burial! The sword shot straight for the giant, and the giant swung its other hand at the sword. The powerful force within the slap caused space to crack apart. However, it was up against one of the sharpest swords in this universe. Hiss! Burial instantly slashed through the giant's arm, and it didn't slow down at all as it pierced through the giant's forehead. The giant's powerful physical defenses were weak as paper before Burial. Meanwhile, Yang Yi had arrived before Jiang Yun. The latter was about to say something when Yang Yi swung his sword. Bam! Jiang Jun's soul was instantly obliterated. Yang Yi sheathed his sword. Meanwhile, Burial automatically returned to the sword gourd. Yang Yi gazed at Arya. She waved at Yang Yi to say that she didn't need any help. She wanted to fight it in single combat. While she wouldn't say anything if he did help her, he hoped that she could defeat it herself. Moreover, he believed in her. Not to mention that demon, even he wasn't confident in being able to defeat Arya. Yang Yi turned to look into the distance, and then he tapped his right foot down. A sword howl resounded. Along with a sword howl, the arm of a giant over 1 kilometer away was separated from its body. At the same time, a black sword pierced through its chest. Bang! The giant exploded into pieces. Right when Yang Yi was about to launch another attack, a divine sense slammed down from afar. Everyone here was shocked. They sensed it, and the aura it emanated felt simply impossible to fight against. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. A moment later, he shot up into the starry sky, and it didn't take long for the divine sense to arrive above him. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly, and he opened them a moment later. This time, his eyes were blood red. The demonic sword Dao. Moreover, the sword precursor in his grasp had turned blood red. Yang Yi raised it above him with both hands, and then a moment of silence ensued before Yang Yi shouted with fury. Slash! As soon as he said that, he swung his sword with both hands. Hiss! The space before him was sliced open like scissors cutting through cloth. However, the divine sense and its pressure weren't affected at all. Meanwhile, Yang Yi raised his sword again and swung it down. Explosive heavenrend combined with the madness sword technique. Bang! 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 Along with a string of explosions, Yang Yi was pushed back repeatedly. He was pushed extremely far away. However, the pressure had been slashed apart as well. But he hadn't been able to gain even the slightest advantage against it. Meanwhile, the giants fighting against Jian Wudi and the others retreated into outer space. Yang Yi wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth and looked up at the starry sky. Obviously, an extraordinary figure of the four-dimensional universe was behind that. A moment of silence ensued, and then Yang Yi suddenly patted the sword gourd on his waist. A sword howl resounded, and then a ray of light shot up into the sky and chased after the retreating giants. Suddenly, a hexagonal energy shield appeared in outer space. It appeared in Burial's path. Bang! The sword struck the shield, causing it to shake and crack open slightly. But Burial was blasted back to Yang Yi. Yang Yi grabbed Burial in his right hand. Bam! The force that came from the sword caused Yang Yi's arm to crack open. At the same time, he was pushed almost 3 kilometers back. Meanwhile, the hexagonal shield gradually vanished from there. As for the giants, they had vanished. And Nanjing asked, "Should we give chase?" Yang Yi shook his head. "The strength of that person just now is unfathomable. Chasing after them is meaningless." And Nanjing spoke solemnly. "Looks like the four-dimensional universe has started to take action." Yang Yi sheathed his sword and spoke softly. "Indeed they have." He gazed at Arya. Arya had killed the demon beast. However, she didn't devour its energy. Yang Yi was quite surprised. Has she become a vegetarian now? Meanwhile, Arya patted the corpse and said, Big brother Yang, this fellow's skin is thick. Snowy can use it to make some armor for the others. Ensure it'll be useful. Yang Yi's eyes lit up and hurried over to her. He sized up the demon beast and touched it. Just as Shed said, its skin was really thick. While it couldn't compete with Arya's scales, it was still very precious. Yang Yi nodded. That's a great idea. Arya grinned, and then she dragged the demon beast into the primordial pagoda. However, Snowy didn't dare to skin it. So, she made Oxy and the others do the work. All of them would naturally not refuse. It was fine so long as they weren't the ones being skinned. Moreover, they could have a nice meal once they were done. Because Arya didn't seem interested in it. Besides the skin, the powers of Universe City started searching for precious natural treasures, like rare ores and anything else which could be used to forge armors and weapons. They found them all and moved them into the primordial pagoda. So Snowy's ascension platform was covered in the precious materials from all the powers throughout the universe. Snowy was overjoyed by this because she could finally forge as she pleased. Of course, she hadn't thought about how or what she would forge. In any case, she would just hammer them and knead them, outside the primordial pagoda. In Universe Hall, Yang Yi gathered the others there. Besides Ding Xiaoyao, everyone else here was at the Destiny Realm. All of them had extremely solemn expressions on their faces, and the atmosphere here was quite heavy as well. Yang Yi said, You've seen what happened. What do you think? They remained silent. Yang Yi smiled. Do you have nothing to say? Yan Wu suddenly said, Brother Yang, since we're all on the same boat, and we have no way out, just tell us what we should do, then we'll do it. As for surrendering or fleeing, none of us are idiots, so no one will do something as stupid as that. They nodded to display their agreement. Meanwhile, an old man said, At times like this, staying united is of the utmost importance. We have a chance to survive if we work together, but if we tried to flee on our own. He shook his head slightly. How can anyone survive when the home is lost? Actually, there was an even more important point. They were people who held real authority in this universe now. At a time like this, how could they possibly give up on this universe? Moreover, they were well aware that even if they gave it up, the enemy may not spare them. The weak didn't have the right to live. Yang Yi glanced at them and said, Don't be too pessimistic. The four-dimensional universe may be very strong, but we aren't weak. Just as this senior here said, so long as we stay united, we still have a chance to win. Just like the previous battle, didn't we win it? Of course. He smiled and continued, Even if we lose, isn't it just death? They gazed at him, and he grinned. We're already at a time like this, so let me be honest. Our goal is to disregard our lives and fight against it all. Fight to the death. Even if we die, we must die with dignity. Chapter 2765 Anyone Can Brag. Chapter 2765 Anyone Can Brag. Face death to live again. All of them clearly understood what Yang Yi meant. Needless to say, what he said did make quite a bit of sense to them. Because in this situation, they had to be prepared for death in order to have a chance at winning. There was no luck involved. One side had to die. At the very least, Yang Yi was prepared for that. Flee? He wouldn't choose to flee this time. All of them left, and only Ding Xiaoyao and Yang Yi remained in the hall. Ding Xiaoyao suddenly said, This is just the beginning. Yang Yi nodded. I know. She spoke solemnly. Do you have a plan? Yang Yi gazed at Ding Xiaoyao and smiled. What could I possibly have? My plan is to fight, of course. Otherwise, what else can I do? She nodded slightly. Fight. It was the only choice all the cultivators of the three-dimensional universe had. Because there was nowhere to run to. Meanwhile, an old man entered the hall, Chindaozi. Yang Yi gazed at the old man. Senior, do you need something? Chindaozi nodded. The formation's essentially ready to be used, Yang Yi said. Tell me about it in detail. Chindozi withdrew a blueprint, and there were some circles and dots on it. He pointed at them and said, See these? These are the formations I set up throughout the universe. I used Earth energy to connect them together. So long as it's activated, all of them will practically simultaneously activate, and the power that would instantly erupt from the formation is entirely capable of annihilating a peak Destiny Realm expert with ease. He gazed at Yang Yi. Even you may not be able to resist this formation. Yang Yi was quite surprised. It's that strong? Chindozi nodded. My clan used to make a living from formations, and it can be said that no one in the three-dimensional universe can surpass my clan when it comes to formations. Chindozi's voice was full of confidence. Yang Yi smiled. Of course. But how long does it take to activate the formation? Around 15 minutes. Chindozi spoke solemnly. I use the divine vein at its core, and it has sufficient spirit energy. Coupled with the sprite progenitor's assistance, it can be said to be practically without flaws. Of course, if an extraordinary expert were to destroy it by force, there's nothing we can do. Yang Yi nodded. I see. I'll leave the formation to you. Chindozi nodded. Contact me if you want it activated. He turned around and left. Once Chindozi left, Yang Yi gazed at Ding Xiaoyao. Do you have information on Zwenmu and the others' whereabouts? She withdrew the myriad world diagram and said, I don't. However, I can guess where they are. Yang Yi was stunned. Ding Xiaoyao said, They dare not stay in worlds with especially abundant spirit energy. Because they dare not take the risk while you have snowy. She pointed at a few spots and said, These places have scarce spirit energy, and they are worlds on the verge of destruction. It's more likely for them to be in these worlds. However, I don't recommend that you go looking for them. I'm sure you know why. Enemies! Yang Yi naturally understood that she was speaking about their current enemy. They had a powerful enemy right now, and if they were to offend the End World's mysterious expert now, it was very likely that they would be stuck in between two formidable enemies. Yang Yi fell silent for a short while and said, Do you have information on the Unfettered One's whereabouts? She replied with a question. Are you sure he will help us? Yang Yi smiled. He will. Why? Ding Xiaoyao was quite puzzled. According to my knowledge, he treats you as his future opponent. Yang Yi smiled. Have you forgotten? He's the Sword Sect's founding ancestor, and Qin Shi is the current master of the Sword Sect. He looked up at outer space and continued. We will definitely fight, but it shouldn't be a problem to seek his help before that, and we have no other choice. Our enemy isn't just strong, they are huge in number. But I don't have much forces on my side, so they are literally bullying us. Ding Xiaoyao shook her head and smiled. Seriously. She spoke solemnly. I've done everything I could, but I still don't have any information on him. If I'm not wrong, he should have left the three-dimensional universe. However, I've sent the Emperor Corps to search beyond the three-dimensional universe. He's an expert from Destiny's era, so going outside to search for someone shouldn't be a problem for him. As for Tian Xiu and Qi Bidian, we don't have any information on them either. Yang Yi spoke softly. So long as it isn't the strongest form of destiny, they should be safe. Tian Xiu and Qi Bishan's strength was something that could definitely keep them safe unless they faced the strongest form of destiny. Yang Yi fell silent for a short while and said, I'm heading out. Yang Yi stood up and left the hall. Ding Xiaoyao glanced at Yang Yi and didn't ask anything. She would ask what had to be asked, but she wouldn't ask what shouldn't be asked. At most times, a person who was too smart would incur the dislike of others. A short while later, Yang Yi left Universe City. At that place in the clouds, the woman raised a piece and put it down. Your forces were trash. A voice resounded. I underestimated him. She smiled. It's not too late. I'll wait for the good news from you. She raised another piece and put it down, and then she smiled. This boundless universe is like a go board. What do you think when you see these pawns live and die? A short while later, the voice replied. Pawns may become the one who plays. A grin with deep meaning arose on the corners of her mouth. Yan Yi left Universe City, and then he fully concealed his aura. Yan Yi withdrew Great Unknown, and then he vanished on the spot. Traveling through the universe. Great Unknown was very convenient when it came to that. Now that the situation in the universe had stabilized. While everything seemed fine on the surface, Yan Yi was very well aware that the three-dimensional universe was surrounded by danger. Even if the four-dimensional universe was ignored, the mysterious experts and the group from the End World were already a threat to them. If he didn't resolve this threat, they would definitely strike a lethal blow to Universe City at the critical moment. A short while later, Yan Yi arrived in a world. It was a world of unknown name, and it was a world where the spirit energy here had dried up completely. The living beings of this world had either perished or fled. This world hadn't been destroyed naturally, it was caused by someone. Yan Yi advanced slowly with his sword in hand. A short while later, he arrived before a mountain. Suddenly, a woman appeared before him. Shu Wubian. Based on her outer appearance alone, she looked like a weak and delicate woman. Of course, if anyone really thought of her in that way, they would pay a terrible price. Shu Wubian grinned. Oh, what brings the great city governor Yang here today? Yang Yi glanced at her and spoke indifferently. Tell your leader to show himself. She grinned. You think he'll just do as you say? Yang Yi smiled. I've heard about you from the strongest form of destiny. She said you're a divine being of this world, and you once brought chaos and slaughter to the world. Shu Wubian chuckled. You know. A very, very long time ago, someone like you wouldn't even have the right to speak to me. Yan Yi tightened his grip on his sheath and smiled. A very, very long time ago? The past should stay in the past. Now, shall we fight one-on-one? Shu Wubian grinned. That's exactly what I was planning. A pitch-black vine instantly appeared below Yang Yi's feet and wrapped around them. A moment later, they stretched toward his entire body. Suddenly, Yang Yi flicked with his left thumb. A sword howl resounded, and then a ray of sword energy flashed and severed all the vines. However, a wooden hand appeared before Yang Yi. Yang Yi took a small step back and swung his sword. Bam! Yang Yi was instantly pushed 300 m back. Shu Wubian's beautiful face was quite vicious at this point. You piece of trash! 100,000 years ago. Suddenly, Yang Yi vanished on the spot, and the area where Yang Yi had been was instantly obliterated. Shu Wubian's eyes narrowed slightly as she raised her arms to defend herself. In an instant, countless vines weaved together to form a shield. Boom! The shield was instantly blasted apart, while Shu Wubian was pushed over 1 kilometer back. However, Yang Yi didn't stop there. A ray of sword energy flashed toward Shu Wubian. Shu Wubian's face was icy cold as she waved her right hand. A towering pillar surged up from the ground and slammed itself at Yang Yi. Yang Yi didn't stop and just swung his sword. Bam! The pillar was sliced into bits. A moment later, Yang Yi's sword slashed down from above Shu Wubian. Shu Wubian looked up at Yang Yi, and she closed her eyes. In an instant, the ground beneath her shook, and then countless vines stretched out from below. After that, they shot at Yang Yi like venomous snakes. Yang Yi swung his sword repeatedly in midair. Explosive heaven rend combined with the madness sword technique. Hiss! 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 In an instant, a dense wave of slashes could be heard in the sky. The vines were ceaselessly sliced into bits, and it didn't take long for the sword energy to grow closer and closer to Shu Wubian. Slash! A furious shout resounded, and then the vines exploded into bits. At the same time, a figure was blasted over 3 kilometers away. It was Shu Wubian. As soon as she stopped herself, a strand of dark green liquid seeped out from the corner of her mouth. She wiped off the blood and looked up at Yang Yi, and then she smiled ferociously. Even the strongest are bullied at their weakest moment. If it were all those years ago, cut the crap! Meanwhile, Yang Yi walked slowly in her direction. If I was born during that time, would there even be a destiny? I would have taught her a lesson with a single swing of my sword. Shu Wubian was slightly stunned, and then a mocking smile arose on the corners of her mouth. Meanwhile, Yang Yi cracked a smile. Anyone can brag. Shu Wubian was stunned speechless. Chapter 2766 Let's Fight. Chapter 2766 Let's Fight. Shu Wubian's face was absolutely unsightly from being insulted like that. However, she was quite shocked at the same time. Yang Yi's strength. She realized that she was actually no match for Yang Yi. At this moment, she started to truly take him seriously. It was alright to be confident, but conceit would be no different than courting death. She didn't have the right to be confident before Yang Yi now. Yang Yi ignored her and looked to the right. Are you still not going to show yourself? As soon as he said that, an ethereal figure soundlessly appeared to the right. It was the mysterious expert. Besides that, Zhou Mu and the others appeared in the surroundings. The mysterious expert said, You seem unafraid. Yang Yi smiled. You won't act against me now? The mysterious expert asked. Why? Yang Yi chuckled. If I die, their gazes will converge on you. I think you can't allow yourself to be exposed, at least now so openly, right? The mysterious expert replied. So what? Yang Yi grinned. That means you have worried, but I don't have to worry about anything. The mysterious expert shook his head. You're no match for me in single combat, and allow me to be honest, if I wanted to destroy Universe City, I could do it right now with the forces at my disposal. This is a huge board of Go, and you, Yang Yi, are just a pawn. A pawn who's just slightly important. Yang Yi nodded. I understand. All of you are extremely formidable, but I'm an insignificant person. He grinned at this point. But I'm very curious. What if I choose sides? Shu Wubian and the others frowned upon hearing this. Choosing a side. Yang Yi was an independent force right now, but what if he chose sides? No one had considered that. Because Yang Yi was usually a very unyielding person, so how could he possibly do that? Yang Yi smiled. You know about my relationship with Destiny. She wants to kill me because I refuse to submit to her. But what if I submit? I'm afraid all of you will be finished. The mysterious expert replied with a question. But would you? Yang Yi shook his head. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't. Because I can't stand the sight of her. But if I really have no other choice, what do you think I would do? The mysterious expert asked. Are you here to threaten me? Yang Yi nodded. I am. The others were stunned speechless. Yang Yi said, The four-dimensional universe won't give up. But you think you can just watch us fight to the death and take advantage of the situation? You must be dreaming. The mysterious expert replied indifferently. What can you do about that? Yang Yi glanced at them and said, I'm here to negotiate. The mysterious expert shook his head. We have nothing to discuss. Yang Yi cracked a smile. All right, I'll go to Destiny now. Let's all die together. As soon as he finished speaking, he withdrew Great Unknown and was about to leave. Suddenly, the mysterious expert asked, What do you want to discuss? Let him go. Suddenly, Shu Wubian spoke coldly. Why should we let him threaten us? Yang Yi gazed at Shu Wubian. All right, then let's fight. Shu Wubian laughed coldly. You think we're afraid of you? Yang Yi waved his right hand, and then in Nanjing an area appeared here. Besides that, a huge formation soundlessly appeared in the clouds above. Chendozi's formation. With the full force of Universe City behind it, it had practically covered the entire universe. As for spirit energy, it had Snowy and the Divine Vein's help, so spirit energy wasn't a problem either. Besides that, a few dozen Destiny Realm experts suddenly appeared in the surroundings. All of them were Destiny Realm experts from Universe City. In an instant, the experts of Universe City had gathered here. It was all thanks to the teleportation formation Chendozi had set up. The atmosphere here became quite tense. However, Shu Wubian and the others didn't reveal a trace of fear. Experts from the previous eras had experienced worse. Yang Yi smiled. If you want to fight, I'll fight you now. We can fight to the death. Perhaps we won't win, but if I'm being honest. He gazed at the mysterious expert and said, I can guarantee that besides him, everyone else here will die. Of course, we may die too. But that's fine. So long as you want to fight now, I'll fight you to the death. The three-dimensional universe's enemy had never been the four-dimensional universe alone, nor had it been just destiny. These fellows before them were the enemies of the three-dimensional universe too, and it was especially so for the mysterious expert. Yan Yi was very well aware that these bastards would definitely stab him in the back while he was fighting the four-dimensional universe. At that time, he would truly be stuck between a rock and a hard place. So, he had to deal with the mysterious expert and the others. Otherwise, the final outcome of fighting the four-dimensional universe would be allowing these fellows to reap the rewards. As for Destiny, he couldn't pay any attention to her right now. He had to deal with their weaker enemies first. Shu Wubian looked ferocious upon hearing Yang Yi and was about to attack, but the mysterious expert stopped her. The mysterious expert said, Didn't you want to discuss something? What is it? Yang Yi replied, Help me fight the four-dimensional universe or destiny. You can choose. Shu Wubian started laughing from extreme rage. Yang Yi, are you dreaming? Yang Yi ignored Shu Wubian and looked the mysterious expert in the eyes. If you refuse to help, I'll attack you. No matter what your objective is, you must kill me before getting to it. But if you help me fight the four-dimensional universe, then we can fight together. In short, you can dream of trying to reap the rewards. The mysterious expert shook his head. To be honest, I really want to eliminate you right now. I really can't stand the sight of you, and my feelings of detest for you are only inferior to my detest for Destiny. As soon as he finished speaking, the mysterious expert raised his hands. In an instant, a huge pitch-black circle of light appeared beneath them. Yang Yi immediately swung his sword. Meanwhile, the mysterious expert swung a punch. Bam! Yang Yi was pushed back. The others were about to attack, but Yang Yi shook his head. Meanwhile, the mysterious expert and the others gradually turned ethereal within the black circle of light. Suddenly, the mysterious expert said, Yang Yi, it won't be long before everyone reveals their hand. At that time, you'll realize how insignificant you are. And it'll take your head. They vanished completely once he finished speaking. At the same time, Ding Xiaoyou's voice resounded in Yang Yi's head. They should have left the three-dimensional universe. Yang Yi nodded. So long as they teleported to somewhere in the three-dimensional universe, they wouldn't be able to hide it from him. So, if they didn't want to fight him to the death, they had a single choice, and it was to leave the three-dimensional universe. Yang Yi glanced at the others. Head back to the city. All of them left. Only Yang Yi and Nanjing and Arya remained here. And Nanjing gazed at Yang Yi. Our chances of winning are very low. Yang Yi nodded. He was very well aware of that. Because up until this point in time, the mysterious expert, Destiny, and even the four-dimensional universe's strength far surpassed Universe City. Just as the mysterious expert had said, if those three forces weren't keeping each other busy and fearing each other, Universe City wouldn't exist by now. Now, the three-dimensional universe may be the wick that lit the flames. A wick that would ignite the war between the three sides. No matter what the final outcome was, Universe City would definitely suffer the brunt of it. Because all three sides wanted the three-dimensional universe, and both Destiny and the mysterious expert wanted Snowy and Arya. Yang Yi gazed at Arya. She represented evil, and Snowy represented good. Big brother Yang! Suddenly Arya said, Come with me to a place. Yang Yi pulled himself out of his thoughts and asked, Where? Arya smiled. Where my true body lies. Your true body? Yang Yi frowned. Arya, are you saying that this isn't your original body? Or? She shook his head. This is my body, a body I recreated. However, my original body still exists. It's being suppressed at a certain place by a woman. I must regain my body. Of course, I can slowly cultivate back to that level, but it's too slow. She gazed at Yang Yi and continued. I'm afraid I won't get a chance to cultivate back to that level. Arya may be young, but she did understand many things. She was very well aware of the situation that Yan Yi and Universe City were in. She didn't have the time to cultivate slowly. Yan Yi thought for a moment and said, "Do you remember where it is?" Chapter 2767 Area No More. Chapter 2767 Area No More. Yan Yi faced Arya and looked her in the eyes with an extremely serious expression on his face. "Arya, I know that we aren't in a very good situation. It's very, very bad even. However, listen up. I'm here, and I'll deal with it all. You don't have to do anything. Even if you want to help, you can do it after I fail, alright?" She gazed at him in silence. Yan Yi added, "I know you want to help me, but you must realize that you're the most important to me. So don't do anything stupid, alright?" Yan Yi placed the horns back on her head. After that, he grabbed her hand and walked toward the city. He didn't want to retrieve her body anymore. Suddenly, Yan Yi discovered that he couldn't pull Arya forward. He stopped and gazed at her. Her head was lowered, and she remained silent. Yan Yi frowned. "Are you not going to listen to me?" She shook her head. "Big brother Yan, we should go get it." Yan Yi shook his head. "No!" Arya looked up at Yan Yi. "I want return to my old self. I just have to eat my old body." "Oh, I mean devour it. Devour it instead of merging with it." "Devour it?" Yan Yi frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She explained. "It's just like how I devour those other fellows. However, I'll be devouring myself. But in this way, I may not be able to rapidly return to my prime, and if I can't rapidly return to my prime, I will only be able to help you fight the weaklings." Yan Yi smiled. "That's enough." He rubbed her head and spoke softly. "Lead the way. However, you must promise me that you won't do anything stupid. Otherwise, both Snowy and I won't forgive you. Moreover, I'm sure you don't want to see yourself fighting me to the death, right?" Arya smiled. "Of course." Yan Yi nodded. Just like that, Arya led him forward, and they vanished into the distant sky. Universe City. Ding Xiaoyao arrived at a secret chamber underground, and Nanjing was by her side. In the chamber, an ethereal figure appeared before them. It was the Emperor Corpse. Ding Xiaoyao spoke softly. "Senior, have you found that sword cultivator?" The Emperor Corpse shook his head. "He may have gone deep within the four-dimensional universe." Ding Xiaoyao spoke solemnly. "Senior, we may need you to go further too." The Emperor Corpse replied solemnly. "Must we find him?" She nodded. "Yes, we must." The Emperor Corpse nodded. "I'll try again. But I dare not go too far." Ding Xiaoyao replied. "If it's too dangerous, please stop. Don't take any risks." The Emperor Corpse nodded. "Understood." He vanished on the spot once he finished speaking. Ding Xiaoyao sat at the side, and then numerous scrolls appeared incessantly on the table before her. Ding Xiaoyao picked one up, glanced at it, and chuckled. "See. While the world isn't in total chaos, there are countless instances of small-scale chaos. Moreover, the various worlds have their own customs, so there are many things that are truly troublesome, and they can't be suppressed by force." And Nanjing glanced at her. "Is it serious?" Ding Xiaoyao smiled. "Managing a single kingdom is difficult, let alone an entire universe. It's not serious, but many powers need to be balanced. They can't be allowed to get too much stronger than the others. Moreover, many of these powers are related one way or another, so it affects them all. Of course, all of them have to hold back while that fellow is here, and they wouldn't dare to act rashly. Besides that, they dare not go against the orders that come from here." She paused for a moment and continued, "I'm really very worried. I'm worried that the world will fall into greater chaos once that fellow isn't here to suppress it all." "Even greater chaos?" And Nanjing frowned slightly. "It won't come to that, right?" Ding Xiaoyao spoke softly. "Division of resources. Presently, the resources throughout the universe are divided by us, and I'm trying my best to divide it equally. But some are starting to criticize this decision of mine. They think that the resources should be given to them. Even if it is to be divided to the smaller worlds and the powers in them, only a very, very small portion should reach them. If I really do that, the gap in strength between the powers and worlds of the three-dimensional universe will be huge. The strong powers will grow increasingly strong while the weak will grow even weaker. If that goes on for long, it will become a form of oppression. Just like how the higher worlds used to oppress us. And Nanjing fell silent. Profounder continent, a small world like that had been lost forever in the end. Ding Xiaoyao stood up and looked into the distance. This situation has practically never occurred in the past, but it has now. However, the universe needs someone who can deter the rest. Otherwise, the chaos that ensued will be unimaginable. And Nanjing shook her head. We just have to do our best. Ding Xiaoyao smiled. Indeed. At this point, we can only do our best. Come on, help me deal with some things. There are some old fellows who refuse to listen to me. And Nanjing nodded, and they left the chamber. At a point in space, Yang Yi and Arya shot forward swiftly. A long time passed before Arya stopped once more, and then she pointed toward a spot in the distance. I can sense it. Yang Yi hesitated for a moment and asked, Is it dangerous? She thought for a moment and was about to reply when Yang Yi suddenly asked, You have to think about it. She cracked a smile. It probably isn't dangerous. Yang Yi spoke seriously. Arya, don't do what Snowy does. Snowy had a bad habit of always leading him into traps. Arya smiled. Don't worry, it won't be dangerous. Unless that woman plans to act against us now. That woman! Yang Yi spoke solemnly. Arya, you fought her in the past? Arya's smile gradually faded upon hearing this. She nodded. I remember a little. She's very powerful, and she really bashed me up. Yang Yi was stunned speechless. Arya glanced at him. She's really formidable. She even made my body collapse. At that time, even if I just stood there and allowed the top 10 experts of this world to hit me, they wouldn't be able to shatter my body. During that time, I was very arrogant. Sigh, but I was still bashed up. All right, let's not speak about it anymore. Yang Yi smiled. He took her hand and walked forward while his thoughts drifted elsewhere. Destiny. Arya was usually carefree, but Yang Yi was very well aware that she was actually an extremely proud person. Now, she'd been defeated. Yet she spoke of it with such composure and calmness. Obviously, she accepted her defeat at Destiny's hands. How strong is that woman? Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. Big brother Yang! A voice suddenly pulled Yang Yi back from his thoughts. Arya pointed ahead. Look! Yang Yi looked over yet saw nothing. She said, I can sense it over there. Yang Yi pondered deeply for a moment, and then he drew Great Unknown and swung it. Hiss! A ray of black sword energy flashed, and then that expanse of space was sliced open. A moment later, it shook violently before a huge hole appeared in front of them. Yang Yi asked, It's in there? She nodded. Yang Yi took her hand and walked toward the spatial rift. A moment later, they entered it, and as soon as they did that, a strand of sword energy suddenly appeared before them. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly because its aura was very familiar. It was Justice's aura. Yang Yi withdrew the sword precursor and was about to act when the sword energy suddenly shot up into the air. A moment later, it vanished from their fields of vision. Arya spoke softly. She's not stopping us on purpose. Arya was naturally referring to the strongest form of destiny. Yang Yi fell silent for a short while, and then he smiled. That's perfect. It saves us the trouble. Let's go! Arya nodded and continued forward with Yang Yi. They arrived at an ethereal space. It was surrounded by a dark grayness, a boundless expanse of it. A long time passed before Yang Yi finally saw a colossus in the distance. It was imprisoned there by 4 rays of sword energy, and because it was covered by sword energy, it was impossible to lay eyes upon the colossus' true appearance. However, based on its blurry figure, it looked slightly like Arya. It had 2 horns and a long tail. Arya gazed at the colossus in the distance. That's my main body. Yang Yi gazed at her. Arya, do you remember what I said? She nodded. Yang Yi rubbed her head gently. No matter what it is, I'll deal with it. If I fail, you can do it. Don't mix up the order, all right? Arya nodded and walked off into the distance. When Arya arrived around 30 m away from it, the 4 rays of sword energy suddenly shot at her. Yan Yi's eyes narrowed slightly, and then he vanished on the spot. A ray of sword energy flashed toward the 4 rays of sword energy. Bang! As soon as they collided with each other, countless strands of sword energy erupted into the surroundings, and Yang Yi was instantly enveloped by the sword energy. Arya gazed at Yang Yi's figure within the sword energy, and as she gazed at him, 2 streams of clear tears suddenly flowed down her eyes. However, she was smiling. A moment later, she wiped off the tears, and then she removed the horns on her head. After that, she placed them before her and spoke softly. Big Brother Yang, I actually know who that mysterious expert is. You're no match for them. You've always been protecting Snowy and me, and now, let me protect both of you for once, so that both of you can live well. As soon as she finished speaking, she walked toward the colossus. Tears kept seeping out of her eyes. Big Brother Yang, Snowy Big Sister in. Don't ever forget me. Once she did it, Arya would cease to exist in this world. Chapter 2768 Chapter 2768 A moment later, Arya was in front of the colossus. She seemed quite lost as she gazed at it. Some time passed before she shot a glance at Yang Yi, and it was full of reluctance. Right when the sword energy was about to completely disperse, Arya pulled her gaze away and walked over. Along with a flash of sword energy, the 4 rays of sword energy exploded into bits. However, they didn't disperse and just drifted toward the surroundings. Sword energy that shattered yet didn't disperse. Yang Yi ignored the shattered sword energy and gazed toward Arya. His expression changed drastically when he saw her horns, and he swiftly looked to the right and howled with fury. Yarwai! Boom! As soon as Yang Yi said that, a wave of monstrous pressure appeared here. A powerful evil aura crushed the space here. At the critical moment, Yang Yi hurriedly took the horns and shot backward. At the same time, he waved his sword to ceaselessly slice apart the pressure and energy rushing toward him. A short while later, Yang Yi had retreated over 10 kilometers back. The space where had been earlier had transformed into a pitch-black hole in space now. Meanwhile, an aura in there was growing increasingly stronger, and it was causing the black hole to warp. Yang Yi was livid as he stared ahead, and he held tightly onto those horns. Just like that, Yang Yi watched as the black hole started to shake violently. In the end, the entire starry sky started to crack open. Yang Yi was forced to retreat again. After retreating more than 10 kilometers again, Yang Yi stopped. But a moment later, his expression changed drastically. The black hole suddenly exploded apart. A wave of energy that carried monstrous pressure swept toward him. Yang Yi swung his sword with an indifferent expression on his face. Hiss! The wave of energy before him was instantly sliced into bits. Suddenly, the entire starry sky started to shake. Yang Yi sheathed his sword and looked forward. He saw a familiar figure there. Arya! At this moment, her body was still the same size. However, she wasn't wearing that small dress with flower patterns anymore, she was wearing a dark red dress instead. She had a pair of horns on her head, but they weren't dark gold, they were dark red. Her tail was dark red now too, and it was even longer like the tail of a dragon. She walked toward Yang Yi with bare feet and indifference on her face. Her eyes were dark red, and every step she took caused space to shake. Her physical strength was so tremendous the world couldn't support it. Yang Yi didn't leave. He was still hopeful. He didn't want to give up on that hope, even if he knew he was in a very dangerous situation right now. Suddenly, Arya stopped and gazed at Yang Yi. She revealed an evil grin while licking her lips. Evil! Good. Shed vanished on the spot when she finished speaking. The space in front of Yang Yi exploded inch by inch. It was being blasted apart by physical strength. Just like that, area vanished from Yang Yi's field of vision. Yang Yi fell silent. Area was gone. Regret. At this moment, Yang Yi was undoubtedly full of regret. He hadn't expected her to make such a choice. It was something he'd never expected. Area was gone just like that. Yang Yi gazed at the horns in his grasp and fell silent. Meanwhile, Snowy suddenly appeared on his shoulder and rubbed her drowsy eyes. Obviously, she'd just woken up. A moment later, she gazed at the horns, and she was stunned by them. After that, she gazed at Yang Yi. Yang Yi spoke softly. Area went to a place she used to live in. She'll be back soon. Snowy blinked and looked forward with bewilderment in her eyes. She tightened her grip on Yang Yi. Obviously, she'd realized something. Yang Yi spoke softly. It's the truth. She'll be back really soon. Snowy gazed forward for a long time. In the end, she nodded and looked at Yang Yi, but two streams of spirit energy flowed down her eyes. Yang Yi gently wiped off her tears and smiled. Why are you crying, little fellow? I guarantee that Area will come back. She will. Snowy hugged Yang Yi's neck and just pressed her head against him. Yang Yi shot a glance in the direction Area had vanished toward, and then he left with Snowy. Suddenly he stopped and looked to the side. A huge demon that blotted out the sky had appeared nearby, and it was traveling through space in his direction. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. Obviously, it was someone from the four-dimensional universe. Yang Yi patted Snowy lightly, and she immediately took the horns and went back into the primordial pagoda. Yang Yi just stood there and waited in silence. A moment later, the demon grew increasingly closer to her. Meanwhile, a wave of powerful pressure swept toward Yang Yi like a wave. Obviously, the demon had noticed him. Yang Yi remained indifferent, but his gaze was icy cold to the extreme. No one could understand how he felt upon watching Area leave. Why had she made such a choice? Because she wanted to help him. And why was he in this current situation? Had been forced into it. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. Boom! A wave of terrifying sword intent surged up into the air. The demonic sword Dao. At this moment, Yang Yi instantly reached his prime. Suddenly, he opened his eyes, and then he dashed forward at maximum speed. A moment later, he was above the demon, but the demon didn't stop. Conversely, it sped up. It wanted to knock Yang Yi to death. The demon's eyes were full of indifference and contempt. Yang Yi's actions were undoubtedly no different as a man trying to stop an elephant. Meanwhile, Yang Yi drew his sword. Slash! A furious shout resounded through space. A moment later, a sword howl tore through the area. Bang! The demon was instantly blasted away. At the same time, Yang Yi was blasted away too. But it only took a moment for him to force himself to a stop, and then he charged forward again. Hiss! 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 In the starry sky, rays of brilliant sword energy and pitch-black sword energy crisscrossed. The pitch-black sword energy was burial, of course. The demon was pushed back repeatedly while blood sprayed incessantly from it. In the end, a ray of sword energy slashed down its throat. Hiss! The demon's head was chopped off its body. Yang Yi stood there on its back. His entire body was dyed blood red from the demon beast's blood. He looked up into space and spoke fiercely. Destiny and the four-dimensional universe, listen up! I don't care what you want, I'll fight you until the end! Suddenly, a sword shot down from above. Justice! Yang Yi looked up and tightened his grip on the sword precursor. He was just about to attack when the sword precursor suddenly struggled free of his grasp, shot up into the air, and shot at Justice. Yang Yi's expression changed drastically as he understood what the sword precursor was doing. In the end, he didn't stop it. It was the sword precursor's choice. Chapter 2769 The Sword is Blood. Chapter 2769 The Sword is Blood. Yang Yi watched as the sword precursor and justice collided. Bang! In an instant, the starry sky shook violently, and then countless rays of sword energy shot toward the surroundings. Yang Yi watched as some fragments crashed down from above. The sword precursor's fragments. It had been destroyed. Yang Yi gazed at the fragments in silence. A moment later, they descended before Yang Yi. Yang Yi touched them gently, and then he collected all of them. At this moment, he couldn't contact the sword's spirit anymore. He looked up at Justice, and it was glowing with sword energy as it gradually descended toward him. Yang Yi cracked a smile and stretched out his hand. An instant later, a blood-red sword appeared in his grasp. The sword precursor. At a distant point in the clouds, a woman who was playing a game of Go suddenly looked down. A short while later she grinned. A pretty good sword. A sword needs a good master, but the sword itself is important. Seeking the ordinary through death, and a sword made of blood. Interesting indeed. In the starry sky, Yang Yi launched a fierce upward slash. The blood-red sword energy was so powerful that it seemed like it could slash the universe apart. Boom! An explosion resounded, and countless strands of blood-red sword energy shot toward the surroundings. At the same time, a figure gradually fell from above. It was Yang Yi. One of his arms was gone. As for Justice, it was still there. No matter how terrifying the blood-red sword energy around it was, they couldn't get close to Justice. Justice didn't attack again and just vanished into outer space. A sword descended by a Go board high above in the clouds. Meanwhile, a voice resounded before her. "You're not killing him?" She shook her head. "Why would I? I just taught him a lesson. After all, it's not good if he keeps mouthing off all the time." The voice replied. "While he's quite weak, his future is limitless. Aren't you afraid that you'll suffer the consequences of not killing him now?" The woman shot a glance forward. "Do you know the difference between us?" The voice remained silent. She smiled. "The strong are never afraid of strong opponents, and the strong may even foster strong opponents." She put a piece down once she finished speaking. "That mad fellow down below is a smart one. He intentionally infuriated me to seek an advancement in death. You're inferior to him in that aspect. If you dared to disregard your fate and fight me all those years ago, your strength wouldn't be this weak." The voice replied. "At most times, forbearance guarantees a future." The woman grinned. "A future as a great turtle?" She received no reply. The woman chuckled. "You know, if that fellow down there were seated before me, he would definitely swing his sword at me when I said that. Just like how he didn't hesitate to swing his sword when we met for the first time down there. Sword cultivators should be like that, and so should me." She still received no reply. She didn't say anything and just continued playing. In the starry sky, Yang Yi descended slowly. Finally, a long time later he stopped, and his body started to recover. Around 2 hours later Yang Yi stood up. A woman in a blood-red dress was standing before him. The sword spirit! She gazed at Yang Yi in silence. Yang Yi walked over to her, touched her face gently, and said, "Don't be so rash next time, all right?" She nodded. Yang Yi smiled. Meanwhile, she transformed into a ray of blood-red sword energy that entered his forehead. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. The sword precursor's body was actually his own blood. In the past, when he used his blood to feed the sword precursor, had been using his blood to forge her body with his blood. It could be said that so long as he remained alive, the sword precursor would never fall. Of course, it had still been dangerous because the strongest form of destiny was too strong. If she attacked seriously, she may have obliterated the sword precursor for real. Yang Yi had planned to fight destiny to seek an advancement of his own strength, but he hadn't expected the sword precursor to charge forward when justice appeared. She had the same thoughts as him. She wanted to see a breakthrough too. Unfortunately, both of them had failed to truly undergo a breakthrough. However, they'd gained a lot from the collision as well. A huge amount of gains. Both of them had been ready to die earlier. They had risked their lives to seek the ordinary. While it had been quite rash, they had no other choice. Yang Yi had a lot of ties and many people behind him. However, he would never shrink back when he should risk his life. If he worried about this and that, the final outcome would be failure to accomplish anything. He was already in a hopeless situation. All his enemies were stronger than him, so if he still acted fearfully and hesitantly, then he would really have no future. In this battle, both he and the sword spirit had undergone a huge improvement in their mental state. Especially the sword spirit. If she could be said to have been half a step away from attaining the ordinary sword realm, then now, she was just a thin barrier away from attaining it. She didn't have to take a step forward. She just had to tap a finger forward and the barrier would be torn apart. As for Yang Yi, had gained quite a bit too. While had lost, had experienced destiny's strength. Losing allowed one to discern their flaws and how to improve. It could be said that losing was his greatest gain. Yang Yi looked up and left. Universe City. A ray of sword energy descended here. Countless in the city heaved sighs of relief upon sensing the sword energy. Yang Yi entered the hall, and only Ding Xiaoyao, who was dealing with the city's management, was here. She stopped what she was doing and looked up at Yang Yi. The latter spoke solemnly. I must leave the city. So, well, face it together. The others quickly nodded to display their agreement. However, Yang Yi shook his head. It'll be a greater threat to them on my own. Because I can run when I'm no match for them. But if all of you go, it'll be a final battle instead. That would be disadvantageous to us. They wanted to say more, but Yang Yi raised his right hand to make them stop. They stopped speaking, and Yang Yi continued. Once I leave, I will be the first line of defense, and all of you will be the second line of defense. During this time, continue recruiting experts and cultivating. Our world is huge, and I'm sure there are more Destiny Realm experts. He paused for a moment and continued. Besides that, Advisor Ding will represent me in my absence. The Council of Elders can impeach her and remove her from her position. Of course, I don't hope to see all of you engaging in internal strife. Huang suddenly said. You can rest at ease, Brother Yang. We may have differences and disputes, and it is very normal, but if anyone dares to cause trouble, my desolate race will be the first to deal with them. The desolate race could be considered as one of the strongest powers in the universe, and it was only inferior to the Eternal Kingdom's war dimension. Yang Yi gazed at Lu Yuan, the representative of the war dimension, and she spoke solemnly. Don't worry, if anyone dares to carry out any schemes, it'll be the first to kill them. Yang Yi nodded. If I don't return, please hold your heads up high, and keep your backs straight against destiny and the four-dimensional universe. We can die, but we will die on our feet. He walked off once he finished speaking. They watched as Yang Yi walked out of the hall and vanished into the sky. Everyone bowed toward the exit and maintained that bowing posture for some time. Chapter 2770 Agreement in the Clouds. Chapter 2770 Agreement in the Clouds. Yang Yi shot up into the sky on his sword. Countless people were watching that ray of light from within the city. Presently, Yang Yi was the representative of the three-dimensional universe, and it wasn't exaggerated at all to say that. Moreover, he was the three-dimensional universe's backbone. In the hall down below. Everyone! Suddenly, Ding Xiaoyou's voice dragged them back from their thoughts. The others gazed at her. Ding Xiaoyao spoke softly. I have a thought, Huang said. Please go ahead, Miss Ding. Ding Xiaoyao spoke softly. He can't fight the entire four-dimensional universe on his own, and we cannot put all our hopes on him. Huang nodded slightly. Please go ahead if you have any ideas. Ding Xiaoyao glanced at the others and said, We have around 30 Destiny Realm experts here. This can be considered as all the peak experts of our three-dimensional universe. I think we should form a squad with 25 peak Destiny Realm experts, a squad that can provide assistance at any moment. What do you think? The others exchanged glances and started discussing softly. A short while later, an old man stepped forward. Miss Ding, your idea is good, but if that mysterious expert from the end world comes here while we're gone, what do we do then? Ding Xiaoyao nodded. I've considered that possibility. According to my knowledge, the true objective of that mysterious expert from the end world is Yan Yi, or to be more precise, the good sprite and evil beast with Yan Yi. So, it's very unlikely for him to target us. Moreover, he won't act at a time like this. Because if he destroys this place, Yan Yi would definitely give up dealing with the four-dimensional universe and hunt him down instead. I believe that he won't take that risk for now. The old man thought for a moment and said, Indeed. Miss Ding, well, leave the arrangements to you. Ding Xiaoyao glanced at them, and none had any objections. Ding Xiaoyao nodded. I've asked Senior Chun to set up a formation that leads to the outside world. If it's necessary, he'll summon all of you. Please work with me if necessary. Besides that, there's one more thing. There are some bad rumors being spread throughout the universe. Some are saying doomsday is coming. These rumors have caused panic and unrest throughout the universe, and some are seizing the opportunity created by it to cause trouble. According to my investigation, it includes some people and subordinate powers of the people gathered here today. She stood up. I hope you can make them stop. If it still continues a day from now, I will send the Guardians of the Universe. Meanwhile, a middle-aged man spoke solemnly. Miss Ding, it's just a trivial matter. Isn't sending the Guardians of the Universe a little too much? Ding Xiaoyao glanced at the middle-aged man. City Governor Mo, according to my knowledge, your clan seems to reign supreme over others in your city. The middle-aged man's expression changed slightly. Miss Ding, what are you trying to say? Allow me to be frank, there is a difference in strength throughout this world, and my Mo clan is the strongest in Ink City. Is there a problem with that? Is it wrong to be strong? Ding Xiaoyao smiled. Of course not. However, according to my investigation, your clan used some methods to force and coerce the neighboring cities, and you took their spirit veins. During this time, you even killed 2 city governors and almost slaughtered a city. Is that correct? The middle-aged man's face instantly turned gloomy. The strong were respected. In this world, it was survival of the fittest. So, his actions weren't wrong at all. Yet now Yan Ye's new order wasn't like that. Ding Xiaoyao continued. Do you have anything to say, City Governor Mo? The middle-aged man spoke solemnly. My city has a huge population, and it wants to expand and become better. I don't think my city has done anything wrong. Ding Xiaoyao nodded slightly and gazed at Huang Ying. Patriarch Huang Ying, your desolate race is the #1 race in the 3-dimensional universe. What do you think? Huang Ying pondered deeply for a moment, and gazed at the middle-aged man. He smiled. City Governor Mo, according to what you've just said, can my desolate race take over everything your city has? The middle-aged man's face instantly turned unsightly. Meanwhile, Ding Xiaoyao suddenly said, Everyone, survival of the fittest and allowing the strong to do as they please is something of the past. The current order is unlike the past. If you think you're very strong and that you can do as you please, then you're absolutely mistaken. Because there's someone stronger above you. She gazed at City Governor Mo. The situation in the world has just been stabilized, and many rules and things have naturally not been done well. It's understandable. So, City Governor Mo, there's a thing known as acknowledging your mistakes and correcting them. What do you think? City Governor Mo hesitated for a moment, and gazed at a nearby old man. He was a Destiny Realm expert. A short while later, the old man gazed at Ding Xiaoyao. Miss Ding, it's just a trivial matter, so just let it pass, all right? Lu Yuan and the others remained silent, and there was a faint cold smile on her face. This incident had nothing to do with the war dimension. How presumptuous of you! Suddenly, Huang Ying shouted furiously and glanced coldly at the old man. The old man was a subordinate of the desolate race. The old man's face was gloomy, and no one knew what he was thinking. Ding Xiaoyao sat back down on her seat and took a sip of tea. Huang Ying glanced coldly at the old man. Elder Fan, just admit your mistakes? The old man fell silent for a moment and smiled. Patriarch Huang, this isn't about admitting mistakes. If I'm being honest, everyone here has risked their lives, so why can't we enjoy some benefits? Why should we risk our lives while the others below just happily enjoy everything? Is that fair? It's unfair indeed. Suddenly, a voice came from outside the hall. Everyone was stunned upon hearing the voice. It was a familiar voice. Elder Fan's countenance had instantly turned pale. Everyone looked over and saw a man standing at the hall's entrance. Yang Yi! He hadn't left. Everyone here instantly came to an understanding. Yang Yi walked into the hall and gazed at Elder Fan. The latter didn't dare to meet Yang Yi's gaze. Yang Yi said, "Why am I risking my life out there? Is it fair to me?" Elder Fan lowered his head and remained silent. He didn't dare to answer Yang Yi. Yang Yi walked to the side and glanced at everyone here. I may not be like all of you. I came from a small world, and that world is gone now. In the past, I always thought the strong are respected, and the strong can do anything they want. Of course, it's a fact. But let me ask all of you something. We may be oppressed by the four-dimensional universe or attacked by destiny at any moment, and they can easily annihilate all of us and the three-dimensional universe at any time. How do all of you feel about that? They remained silent. Yang Yi grinned. Isn't it good to have rules and order? If you bully someone today, you may be bullied tomorrow. Of course, if you're at a level of strength that can match destiny, then just forget I ever said anything. But if you don't have that level of strength, then can you abide by the rules and order I've set? He gazed at Elder Fan as he finished speaking. The latter was sweating profusely. After being in contact with Yang Yi throughout this time, they felt that Yang Yi was actually very easy to get along with. However, no one would forget how terrifying he was when he acted ruthlessly. Both the Desolate Race and Eternal Kingdom didn't dare to infuriate him because they would have to face his ruthless and bloody side. Yang Yi moved his gaze away and continued. Elder Fan, you fought by our side on many occasions, so I don't want to kill you. Elder Fan shuddered, but he heaved a sigh of relief in his heart. He knew he was safe. Yang Yi looked the old man in the eyes. You'll deal with the rest, right? Elder Fan hurriedly nodded. I will. I definitely will. Yang Yi nodded slightly. That's good to hear. He glanced at the others and said, We've all fought side by side, so I don't want to be ruthless to one of my own, and I don't want to make an example of any one of you. However, I don't want anyone to act rashly. The others nodded. Actually, they were quite surprised by how he dealt with this. Because Yang Yi hadn't killed anyone. As far as they were concerned, Elder Fan was dead the moment Yang Yi stepped into the hall. However, they hadn't expected him not to kill anyone. Of course, it made them feel quite warm inside because Yang Yi wasn't that ruthless to his own. Meanwhile, Yang Yi added, The war is about to begin, and I'm leaving this place. I don't want anything bad to happen here, I really don't. Huang Ying spoke solemnly. It won't. My negligence caused this. Yang Yi nodded. Brother Huang Ying, you represent the biggest clan, and you have many subordinate powers. Your responsibility is huge. Huang Ying nodded. I understand. Yang Yi smiled. Then take care, everyone. Yang Yi vanished from the hall. This time, had really left. In the hall, Ding Xiaoyao, who had remained silent until now, suddenly stood up and walked out of the hall. She looked up into the clouds and could faintly see a ray of light there. As she gazed at it, she gradually started to stare blankly in that direction. A short while later, she spoke softly. You better come back. Yang Yi shot through the starry sky on his sword. Somewhere high up in the clouds, a woman in front of a go board suddenly looked up in a certain direction, and she smiled. Monarch Yen, do you see that? He has left. He plans to take the initiative against your four-dimensional universe. Ha ha! A voice resounded before her. Want to make a bet? She smiled. Yes, the voice said. You don't even know what the bet is. She grinned and remained silent. A short while later the voice said, Well, bet on whether he can survive past a month. The condition is that you don't interfere. The woman nodded. All right. She gazed ahead and smiled. I can't interfere. Yes, I understand what you mean. I can't interfere even if you act against him. The voice asked. Is that a deal? She smiled. It is. Chapter 2771 Descent. Chapter 2771 Descent. In the boundless starry sky, Yang Yi looked ahead with a trace of worry in his eyes. He was worried about many people. Qi Bitian, Tian Xiu, Yang Busi, the woman in white, Area. Yang Yi's heart sank when he thought about her. Area had stopped attacking him, so he knew that she definitely hadn't fully forgotten about him and Snowy. Of course, Area wasn't the same Area anymore. Everything was gradually changing. Besides being here to stop the four-dimensional universe, Yang Yi's second goal was to find Tian Xiu and Qi Bitian. He hoped all of them would be fine and well. He didn't want to lose any of them. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly and the sword precursor was beneath his feet. In the primordial pagoda, Snowy laid there on the ascension platform, and the pair of horns were before her. Aria's horns. Since Aria left, Snowy wasn't as carefree as Shed used to be. She was mostly silent, and she would stay silent for a long time. No one dared to disturb her. A long time passed before Snowy touched the horns gently, and then spirit energy tears gradually flowed out of her eyes. In the distant starry sky, at an unknown abandoned planet, a black shadow suddenly descended here. Bang! The black shadow descended, causing the ground in a huge area to collapse. Meanwhile, a group appeared nearby. They were led by the mysterious expert from the End World. He was covered in black energy, and his appearance was impossible to discern. Shuobian Zhuangmu, Emperorly with his newly recovered body, and the others were all behind him. All of them were looking at the petite figure ahead. They frowned upon seeing it clearly. It was a young girl. A young girl with dark red horns, and there was a long, dark red tail behind her. The young girl's eyes were dark red too. She had an indifferent expression on her face, and the aura she emanated aroused a solemn expression on all their faces. The evil beast. Emperorly was about to attack, but the mysterious expert shook his head. She isn't the same evil beast you knew. You'll die if you attack her. Emperorly gazed at the mysterious expert, and the latter spoke softly. It's the evil beast who once dared to challenge destiny. All of you stand back. Emperorly glanced at Zhuangmu and was quite hesitant, but Shu Wubian had already retreated. They were facing the real evil beast. Shu Wubian glanced at them. Move farther away if you don't want to die. She was 30 kilometers away once she finished speaking. Zhuangmu and the others hesitated for a moment, and they chose to retreat in the end. They didn't know how terrifying the real evil beast was, but they knew how proud Shu Wubian was. But at this moment, she hadn't hesitated to shrink back, and just that was enough to prove many things. A short while later, only the mysterious expert and Area remained here. Area walked slowly in the mysterious expert's direction. He crossed his arms before his chest and asked, Is Yang Yi not here? Area suddenly stopped. The mysterious expert stretched out his right hand and clenched it. In an instant, a wave of terrifying energy surged out of his right arm. Meanwhile, a small fist slammed down at him. Bang! The energy emanated by the mysterious expert was instantly obliterated before the punch. At the same time, the mysterious expert was pushed over 3 kilometers back. As soon as he stopped himself, his figure floated forward like a phantom. Area suddenly slammed another punch forward. As soon as her fist shot forward, a foot kicked it. Bang! The space here collapsed and formed a pitch-black hole in space. Area suddenly unfurled her fist and grabbed the mysterious expert's leg, and then she pulled him toward her. After that, she raised her right knee at him. However, the mysterious expert reacted very quickly. As soon as he was pulled to Area, he swiftly overlapped his palms and slammed them down at Area's knee. Bang! The mysterious expert was instantly blasted over 30 kilometers away. Emperor Li and the others' expressions turned extremely solemn from the sight of this. While the mysterious expert hadn't exposed too much of his strength, it was extremely terrifying. But at this moment, he was at a disadvantage against Arya. The others gazed at Arya, and they wondered how strong her physical strength was. Suddenly, the mysterious expert's figure turned ethereal, and then everyone gazed at Arya. An afterimage soundlessly appeared before Arya, and the latter remained indifferent as she slammed a punch at it. Bang! An explosion resounded, and Arya was blasted over 10 kilometers away. Meanwhile, another afterimage appeared before her. She stomped her foot down, soared up into the air, and stomped down. Boom! Arya was blasted away. Meanwhile, another afterimage soundlessly appeared behind her, and then a finger tapped on her back. Besides that, afterimages appeared on her left, right, top, and bottom. At this moment, she was surrounded by them. Bang! 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 Muffled explosions resounded throughout the sky, and then a figure was blasted backward repeatedly. It was Arya! Zhuanmu and the others seemed to visibly relax at the sight of this, and they gazed at the afterimages. Obviously, the mysterious expert had started to gradually reveal his strength. Suddenly, Arya, who was being suppressed, slapped her palms forward. Boom! Boom! The world shook before this attack, and the afterimages around her were instantly blasted into bits. The mysterious expert's main body was pushed backward repeatedly until he arrived right before Zhuanmu and the others. Arya looked up at him, and her hands were emanating a scarlet-red glow. Besides that, the dark matter around her had started to collapse. The mysterious expert crossed his arms before himself. Did Yang Yi send you? Arya's face gradually turned ferocious. Suddenly, she leaped up, and then she shot toward them like a shooting star. The mysterious expert pulled his arms back, and then Zhuanmu and the others were instantly teleported far away. Meanwhile, Arya had arrived above him. This time, she didn't use her fists, and just slammed herself at him. The mysterious expert raised his hands slightly. In an instant, a pitch-black energy shield appeared between his hands. At the instant the shield fully condensed into form, Arya's body had arrived before it. Bang! The shield exploded into bits upon coming into contact with Arya's horns. However, the mysterious expert suddenly pressed forward at this moment, and slammed a punch against her head. His fist flickered with a mysterious pitch-black glow. Boom! Arya was blasted away while the mysterious expert was instantly pushed 30 kilometers away. Threads of blood flowed down Arya's forehead, and her face instantly turned blood red. Meanwhile, she stared at the mysterious expert. Kill her? Suddenly, Shu Wubian spoke from the mysterious expert's side. The mysterious expert shook his head. We can't kill her. At least not in my current state. Meanwhile, Arya suddenly charged at the mysterious expert. She wasn't very fast, but every step she took caused the world to tremble before her. Strength. Pure physical strength. Shu Wubian and the others had extremely solemn expressions on their faces. Her physical strength was truly too terrifying. The mysterious expert waved his right hand, and a huge blue circle of light appeared beneath them. A moment later, their figures started to turn ethereal. However, Arya had arrived above them. The mysterious expert slapped his right palm upward. Boom! A wave of powerful energy stopped Arya's attack. Meanwhile, he twisted his right hand. Bang! The energy exploded apart and pushed Arya backward repeatedly. Meanwhile, the mysterious expert and the others had vanished. Arya wiped off the blood on her face and looked up into outer space. Her scarlet-red eyes seemed slightly bewildered. Why do I want to kill him? A short while later, she wiped off the blood on her face again, and then she looked up. Kill! She stomped her right foot down and shot up into the sky. Her figure tore through everything in her path. Meanwhile, a group appeared in the starry sky, and they were led by the mysterious expert. He looked up into the distance, and then he suddenly looked back. The space below was shaking violently as if something was coming. Shu Wubian was livid. She's coming! Shall we join forces and kill her? The mysterious expert shook his head. We can't. Shu Wubian gazed at the mysterious expert and was very puzzled. Why? The mysterious expert replied softly. Her strength is growing. If we collide head-on with her, she may exhaust all of you to death, so it's best not to confront her directly. He waved her hand, and a huge teleportation formation appeared below them. Meanwhile, Shu Wubian mocked him. So we're going to be cowards? The mysterious expert suddenly gazed at her, and then a wave of powerful energy pushed her out of the teleportation formation. The mysterious expert said, Since you think you're very strong, you can face her yourself. They vanished on the spot once he finished speaking. Shu Wubian's face was terrifyingly gloomy. Suddenly, a wave of energy surged up from below toward her. Shu Wubian looked down and raised her hands slightly. In an instant, countless vines shot out from the space below. Meanwhile, a petite figure appeared before those vines. A punch shot forward. Boom! The vines exploded apart, and then Arya appeared before Shu Wubian. The latter's expression changed drastically, and she hurriedly retreated. Arya didn't chase after her and just swung a punch from afar. Boom! Shu Wubian was instantly punched away. Her figure cracked open in midair while blood sprayed incessantly from her mouth. Arya was about to attack again when she suddenly looked up. A woman was looking down at her from somewhere above the clouds. Arya gazed at her, and then she suddenly raised a thumb at the woman before pointing it downward. The woman high above the clouds grinned. She waved her hand, and a sword by the go board flew into her grasp. She descended from the clouds with her sword in hand. Chapter 2772 Omni Ruin. Chapter 2772 Omni Ruin. However, she only took a few steps before stopping abruptly. She shook her head and smiled. You're not at your prime yet. Killing you now would be too boring. It'll wait a while longer. She returned above the clouds once she finished speaking. In the starry sky, Arya looked up with bewilderment on her face. Her memories had recovered slightly, but she had some other memories too. These memories made her feel uneasy, and she had an obsession in her heart. It was a very, very deep obsession. She felt that she had to do some things, like killing the woman above the clouds. Arya moved her gaze away and looked ahead. Shu Wubian had vanished, and there were only some shattered branches there. Arya relaxed her fist and walked off into the distance. She was all alone. At a certain point in outer space, the battle here was exceptionally intense. 4 women and 4 demon beasts. They'd been fighting for many days and nights. Bang! Suddenly, a figure was blasted backward repeatedly, and that figure was pushed all the way out of the battlefield. It was Chi Bitian. She was the weakest among the 4 right now, because she hadn't recovered her full strength. Chi Bitian wiped off the blood on the corner of her mouth and grinned. This is fun! Ha ha! She was still laughing when a figure appeared above the beast, and then a huge claw slammed down upon it. Sky Claw! Bang! The demon beast was blasted down from midair. But just a moment later, it looked up and howled with fury. After that, its figure spun, and then it slammed itself at Chi Bitian. Suddenly, Chi Bitian raised both her hands and closed her eyes slowly. Space warped between her palms. Mortal destruction! A soft shout resounded, and then a pair of palms descended onto the beast. A head-on collision! Boom! The beast was blasted away. Meanwhile, Chi Bitian took a step forward. Hiss! The space in front of her cracked open, and it was cracking rapidly. In just an instant, the cracks had arrived before the demon beast that had been blasted away. Meanwhile, a figure soundlessly appeared. It was Chi Bitian. Boom! It seemed as if Chi Bitian just stood there, but the demon beast was blasted away again. Suppression. Meanwhile, 2 and the others had suppressed the rest of the demon beasts. A man was watching the battle from somewhere higher up in space. He was exceptionally tall and huge. He looked human, but he was many times larger than a human. Besides that, his entire body was extremely smooth like a mirror. It wasn't due to an armor, and it was his body that was like that. Besides that, his features were somewhat indistinct and very different from ordinary humans. The man held an extremely long pike in his grasp while watching Chi Bitian and the others. A long time passed before he suddenly turned around and fell to one knee in a certain direction. "Master, shall I attack?" A short while later, a voice came from the space before him. "You are no match for them either. They'll get others to keep them busy. Your goal is Yang Yi and the three-dimensional universe. Sengmo, remember that while Yang Yi's strength is inferior to you, you must not underestimate him or be careless." Sengmo stood up slowly. "I will definitely take Yang Yi's head." He turned around and left. "Wait." Suddenly, the voice resounded. "Take the 12 demon guard." Sengmo shook his head. "I alone am enough." The voice replied. "I've told you not to underestimate him. Didn't you hear me?" Sengmo bowed slightly. "Forgive me." Meanwhile, 12 ethereal figures with pikes in their grasps appeared behind Sengmo. There were men and women among them, and all of them were only slightly smaller in size to Sengmo. Sengmo bowed slightly and left with them. The area fell silent once more. Meanwhile, the battle down below was still going on. Suddenly, a figure flashed by. A moment later, Yang Busy and the others looked to the side, and their faces practically simultaneously turned solemn. "It's a clone of the four-dimensional lord." Tu spoke abruptly. "A clone?" Yang Busy glanced at Chibitian and Tianxiu. "Who's going to deal with him?" "I will." Chibitian charged over once she finished speaking. Boom! A rumbling explosion resounded through the area. Yang Busi moved her gaze away and looked at Tianxiu. "Deal with these bastards quickly." Tianxiu nodded, and then she formed a strange seal before her. Omni Ruin. In the starry sky, Yang Yi stopped. He wasn't very far away from the three-dimensional universe, and he could still see it if he looked back. In the end, he decided to stay here. Because anyone coming to the three-dimensional universe would have to get through him. Yang Yi placed a chair here in the starry sky, and then he sat on it. A sword floated by his side while a sword gourd was hanging by his waist. In the primordial pagoda, Snowy had gathered all the demons at the ascension platform. Snowy pointed at the primal true dragon and the others, and then she started waving her paws swiftly. All of them just gazed at Yang Yi. Of course, they didn't know what she was saying because she was waving her paws too quickly. But that didn't affect them. Because they just had to do as Snowy said later. Grow stronger. What Snowy said was actually very simple. She wanted to help them grow stronger, so strong that they could help Yang Yi in battle. Presently, the primal true dragon and the others weren't able to keep up with Yang Yi at all. If they didn't improve, they could only be kept like pets. Snowy didn't want that. Actually, the primal true dragon and the others didn't want that either. But it couldn't be helped when Yang Yi, Arya, and Nanjing, and Snowy were just too fast. They couldn't keep up. If they could, they wanted to join the battles too. All of them were ancient demons who were filled with the desire to fight. Just like that, Snowy stopped refining treasures and helped the demon beasts instead. Besides that, she fostered the world-born fruit and chaotic fruit trees. They were huge trees now and were covered in fruits. The demon beasts had an endless supply of these fruits now. If cultivation wasn't enough, divine treasures could push their cultivations higher. That was Snowy's strategy. Outside the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi sat there on the chair. He was very well aware that the four-dimensional universe wouldn't just give up, nor would the mysterious expert or destiny. He had no other choice but to fight until the end. Suddenly, the space in the distance started to tremble. Yang Yi looked up with indifference. The trembling grew stronger. Obviously, something was approaching. A moment later, the space here started rippling like boiling water. Meanwhile, Snowy appeared on Yang Yi's shoulder. He rubbed her head gently and tossed her back into the primordial pagoda. This wasn't a battle she could interfere in. In the primordial pagoda, Snowy lay there on the ascension platform with a helpless expression on her face as she looked up into the air. She felt that she was very strong. Outside the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi gazed forward indifferently. A short while later, over a dozen figures appeared before him, and they were led by Tseng Mo. All of them were peak Destiny Realm experts, and the expert who led the group felt a little unfathomable. Tseng Mu and the others stopped 30 m away from Yang Yi. Over a dozen divine senses and auras locked onto Yang Yi, but Yang Yi wasn't affected by them at all. Tseng Mo sized up Yang Yi. "You're Yang Yi?" Yang Yi nodded. "Why? Do you know me?" Tseng Mo replied. "I don't, nor am I interested in getting to know you." Yang Yi grinned. "Then why did you even ask?" Tseng Mo raised his right hand to tell the others to step back. They were clearly quite hesitant. Tseng Mo glanced coldly at them. They didn't dare to disobey him, and retreated. Tseng Mo gazed at Yang Yi again. He was about to speak when Yang Yi suddenly drew his sword and dashed forward. Yang Yi was so fast that he instantly arrived before Tseng Mo, and then he slammed his sword down. Tseng Mo raised his pike to defend himself. Boom! The space here shook and cracked open. After he stopped Yang Yi's attack, Tseng Mo swung a punch at Yang Yi's head with his other hand. Heaven Shield soundlessly appeared on Yang Yi's right arm, and he swept it toward Tseng Mo's fist. Bang! An explosion resounded, and Yang Yi had returned to his chair. But just a moment later, a ray of sword energy flashed. Slash! As soon as Yang Yi shouted with fury, a ray of sword energy slashed down from above Tseng Mo. Tseng Mo spun rapidly while sweeping his pike at Yang Yi. Bang! Yang Yi was swept back to where it had come from, but a sword shot through Tseng Mo's chest. Burial! That was Yang Yi's true lethal attack. Tseng Mo looked down at his chest. There was a hole there. Head defended himself against Yang Yi's first attack, but Head failed to defend himself against the flying sword. The flying sword had pierced his body with ease. The sword gourd trembled by Yang Yi's waist, and then a sword shot into it. Yang Yi looked up at Tseng Mo. While burial had pierced through him, Tseng Mo seemed to be completely fine. Tseng Mo said, "You must be very curious, right?" Yang Yi nodded. "A little," Tseng Mo replied. "Because our physique isn't the same as lowly creatures like all of you." "Lowly creatures?" Yang Yi was stunned, and then he roared with laughter. He pointed upward and said, "If your four-dimensional universe is that great, would you have been suppressed by a woman and remained afraid of showing yourselves for thousands of years? If you really are that amazing, then go on. Go kill her." Chapter 2773, Self-Detonation. Tseng Mo's expression turned extremely unsightly. Destiny. The four-dimensional universe was much more developed than the three-dimensional universe, and its overall strength was much, much stronger as well. It could be said that besides the three-dimensional universe during Destiny's time, the current three-dimensional universe couldn't compete with the four-dimensional universe at all. Even during Destiny's era, Destiny had been the only one in the three-dimensional universe who was capable of fighting the four-dimensional universe. However, the three-dimensional universe had Destiny. Just Destiny alone suppressed the entire four-dimensional universe. A humiliation. It was a humiliation for the entire four-dimensional universe. However, they couldn't do anything about it. That woman was like a god, an unbeatable god. Yang Yi's words had undoubtedly struck him where it hurt. Tseng Mo didn't waste his breath and just hurled his pike at Yang Yi. Yang Yi suddenly vanished on the spot, and a ray of sword energy slashed against the pike. Boom! The pike shook violently, but it quickly calmed down. Because a hand had grabbed onto it. Tseng Mo was behind the pike. Tseng Mo shook the pike, shattering the sword energy on it. At the same time, he stabbed it forward. Yang Yi suddenly released the sword precursor, and then Heaven Shield appeared on his arms before he clamped down at the pike in front of him. Bam! Yang Yi's figure shook violently, but Head forcibly clamped down on the pike. Tseng Mo frowned slightly. He was about to attack when Yang Yi suddenly pressed forward and slammed himself at Tseng Mo. A mocking grin appeared on his face when he saw this. When had he ever feared someone in a clash of physical strength? So, he didn't retreat and slammed himself at Yang Yi as well. However, at the last moment, the sword gored on Yang Yi's waist shook slightly, and then a ray of light flashed. Sang Mo's expression changed drastically. Had experienced the strength of that sword, but he couldn't retreat anymore. Sang Mo raised his right arm to defend himself. He was defending himself with his hand. Hiss! Burial sliced off his arm with ease, and Yang Yi seized the opportunity to slam himself against Sang Mo. Bang! Sang Mo was instantly blasted away. Yang Yi was about to follow up with another attack, but a pike suddenly stabbed over from his right. Yang Yi was forced to stop and swing his sword to the side. Bang! The pike was slashed away, but Sang Mo had retreated 3 kilometers away as well. Had created a huge amount of distance between them. Yang Yi shook his head and felt that it was quite a pity. Had almost killed Sang Mo at that instant. Unfortunately, that fellow had interfered. Yang Yi looked over at Sang Mo. So you didn't plan to fight me in single combat? Oh, I understand. This is how the 4-dimensional universe is. If you can't win a one-on-one battle, you gang up on your opponent. TSK, TSK. What an embarrassment, what an absolute embarrassment. Sang Mo's face turned extremely gloomy. He glanced coldly at the expert who'd interfered earlier, and the latter lowered their heads slightly. Command Sang Mo, don't forget our master's instructions. Sang Mo spoke fiercely. Do I need you to teach me what to do? That expert hurriedly fell to one knee. I dare not. Sang Mo glanced coldly at that expert. He hesitated for a moment, and then gave up his intention to continue the one-on-one battle. He was here with a mission. Suddenly Yang Yi pointed his sword at them. Stop discussing it among yourselves. Come on. Just fight me together. While our 3-dimensional universe doesn't have many experts, we have backbone. Since I said I would fight you on my own, I'll do just that. Even if you decide to gang up on me. It's fine, I'll fight all of you on my own. Even if I die, I will never bring shame to the 3-dimensional universe. Sang Mo's expression instantly turned extremely unsightly, and he glanced at the others by his side. Don't interfere again. One of them suddenly said. Commander Sang Mo, he's just goading you. Sang Mo replied coldly. Do you think I'm not aware? He walked toward Yang Yi while he spoke. He wasn't a fool, so he naturally knew what Yang Yi was up to. But he chose to fight Yang Yi in single combat. The strong had their own backbone and honor. Yang Yi was challenging him with a weaker cultivation. If he refused to accept the challenge, then even he would look down on himself. He was fighting for honor. Yang Yi glanced at the others behind Sang Mo and said, I think you should just gang up on me. Sang Mo laughed coldly. Is that even necessary against someone like you? He suddenly shot up into the air, and then a peerlessly powerful storm of energy gathered rapidly in the starry sky. Yang Yi looked up and tightened his grip on his sword sheath. Meanwhile, a pike carried strands of pitch-black lightning as it shot down from above. When it arrived around 30 m away from his head, Yang Yi suddenly shot up into the air. A sword hull cracked open the entire starry sky. Boom! A rumbling explosion resounded, and then countless arcs of lightning and sword energy shot toward the surroundings. Meanwhile, a ray of black sword energy flashed through space. Along with that flash, the entire starry sky suddenly fell silent. The 12 demon guard frowned and were ready to attack at any moment. Yang Yi and Sang Mo stood 300 m away from each other, and Sang Mo had lost his other arm. Had lost both his arms now. A strand of blood could be seen on the corner of Yang Yi's mouth, but based on his speed of recovery, such an injury was insignificant to him. Sang Mo's gaze descended on the sword gored by Yang Yi's waist. The sword there was truly too sharp. Of course, the sword in Yang Yi's grasp was very formidable as well. Yang Yi was holding the sword precursor. It could bring forth his full strength, but burial may not be able to do the same. The sword precursor was the most suitable sword for him, and it was the sword he could use the best. But if it was in terms of sharpness alone, the sword precursor was inferior to Burial. Zheng Mo's physical body was extremely strong, but he was facing one of the sharpest swords in the three-dimensional universe. Meanwhile, Yang Yi grabbed the hilt of his sword. The others behind Zheng Mo became vigilant, and were prepared to act at any moment. Yang Yi gazed at Zheng Mo, cracked a smile, and said, "Advanced person of the four-dimensional universe, do you dare to take another swing of my sword? Do you dare?" It was spoken very calmly, but every word shook their hearts. Zheng Mo looked Yang Yi in the eyes, and a short while passed before he smiled. "I apologize for looking down on you. You're an opponent worthy of respect." As he spoke, he walked slowly in Yang Yi's direction. The guards behind him were about to act, but he suddenly said, "Don't bring shame to our four-dimensional universe. If any of you dare to interfere, you'll be my greatest enemy in this life." The guards were very conflicted and put in a difficult position. Shame. How could they not realize that if they interfered now, it would be an embarrassment? However, if they didn't interfere, could Zheng Mo resist another attack from the young man? Zheng Mo had lost both his arms, and his pike had been slashed into bits by Burial. He only had his body now. But Yang Yi was completely whole, and he had two swords too. However, Zheng Mo had still chosen to face Yang Yi on his own. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly and held tightly onto the sword precursor. At this moment, their hearts were one. The enlightened sword heart. Actually, Yang Yi noticed that had been mistaken in the past. The enlightened sword heart wasn't just capable of seeing through flaws. The true enlightened sword heart was actually the linkage of man and sword, and the mutual enlightenment they had. When he treated the sword as something he should protect, he discovered that the sword Tao was that complicated. Of course, it was also simple. It all depended on how he thought of it. Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly opened his eyes. A sword howl blasted open the sky. A ray of sword energy slashed down at Zheng Mo. Zheng Mo calmly watched the sword energy grow closer and closer to him, and then it stabbed into his throat. As soon as it stabbed halfway into his throat, Zheng Mo clamped his palms down on Yang Yi's sword. A moment later, his body started to expand and exploded. Self-detonation. Boom! In an instant, all the demon guards in the surroundings were blasted far away, and the space before him was obliterated inch by inch. All of them were shocked and hurriedly shot backward, because the space in front of them was still being obliterated. Just like that, they retreated for almost 15 minutes before they finally stopped, and the area before them was pitch black. They couldn't see anything. Even dark matter had been completely obliterated. The self-detonation of a peak Destiny Realm expert was absolutely terrifying. The pitch-black space took almost 15 minutes to gradually start recovering, and it fell silent once more after it was fully repaired. The guards hurriedly looked over, and they saw a figure there. Yang Yi! They didn't say a single word and immediately charged at him. They knew Yang Yi had won. However, it had definitely been a Pyrrhic victory. After all, Yang Yi couldn't be completely unharmed from the self-detonation of a Destiny Realm expert. So, it was their best opportunity to kill him. Suddenly, a woman appeared before them. It was in Nanjing. She stretched out her hand, and a spear appeared in her grasp. Dagger axe? Snowy had repaired it. And Nanjing gazed coldly at the 12 experts before her, and they didn't stop. Suddenly, and Nanjing vanished on the spot. The battle erupted. Meanwhile, Yang Yi looked ahead. There was a pile of fragments before him, and they were from the armor Head been wearing. Besides that, Heaven's shield was completely cracked open on his arms. Head relied on the armor and Heaven's shield to survive the explosion just now. Of course, while Head survived, it wasn't easy. The impact of the explosion had cracked open his body and internal organs. Yang Yi walked slowly to the side and withdrew another chair before slumping down on it. A moment later, drops of blood kept dripping down the chair. He placed his right hand on the armrest. Actually, it couldn't even be called a hand because it had been completely cracked open and had even warped. Yang Yi looked toward the distance, and a long time passed before he laughed with self-ridicule. It isn't that easy to play the hero. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2774. Shall we fight? Dreadful. That battle had been truly quite dreadful. If it hadn't been for the armor and heaven's shield, Yan Yi would have never been able to endure the force of the explosion. Sang Mo's cultivation was already much greater than his, so the power from such a self-detonation was truly too terrifying. Even with the armor and heaven's shield, had been severely injured. Fortunately, had survived. And survival meant the ability to recover. Yan Yi restrained his thoughts, and then a short while passed before he walked off to the side. And Nanjing was being completely suppressed by the 12 demon guard, and she was practically in a hopeless situation. All 12 of them were clearly not ordinary Destiny Realm experts. Fighting 12 of them at once was the best Nanjing could do. Even Yang Yi may not be able to do the same. Suddenly, a flying sword shot out of the sword gourd on Yang Yi's waist. Burial! One of the 12's expression changed drastically, and he swiftly waved his pike. Hiss! The pike was instantly sliced apart, and the sword continued forward. He reacted swiftly to this, and he forcefully dodged to the side, but an arm of his still flew up into the air. Meanwhile, as soon as his figure stopped, a ray of sword energy flashed past his throat. That demon guard's eyes opened wide, and his figure stiffened. Had dodged the first flying sword, and had sensed the aura of death coming from this attack. However, the one who wielded the sword was much faster than him. Once one of them was killed, the others shot backward and gazed fearfully at Yang Yi. A black sword flew back into the sword gourd by Yang Yi's waist. Those guards' expressions instantly became extremely solemn from the sight of this. What a powerful sword! Yang Yi walked slowly to Nanjing's side, and they just gazed at the guards while the guards had no intent to retreat. Yang Yi suddenly walked in their direction. And Nanjing glanced at Yang Yi and followed him. The 11 demon guards frowned when they saw Yang Yi walking over. Is that fellow injured or not? As far as they were concerned, it was impossible for Yang Yi to have been unscathed by the explosion from before. But if he was injured, why was he being so ferocious right now? Meanwhile, Yang Yi suddenly stopped, glanced at them, and said, "Come at us!" As soon as he finished speaking, he grabbed the sword precursor in his right grasp while a sword howl resounded from the sword gourd on his waist. One of the demon guards suddenly stepped forward and said, "He's trying to scare us away. Kill him!" All 11 of them immediately charged at Yang Yi and Nanjing. At this moment, Yang Yi and Nanjing sensed 11 formidable auras. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. Had planned to scare them away. Obviously, they had seen through his intentions. Since he failed to scare them away, he planned to kill until they retreated. Yang Yi opened his eyes, and then he vanished on the spot. Meanwhile, Nanjing suddenly vanished as well. Bang! Bang! The two of them instantly entered into battle with the 11 demon guards. Even if he had burial, Yang Yi found them difficult to kill in an instant. Because all of them were vigilant for it. Moreover, they focused most of their attention on him. So, as long as his flying sword left the sword gourd, around 5 or 6 of them would join forces against it and forcibly suppress burial. If he were in his prime, then fighting them with Nanjing's help wouldn't be a problem at all. The problem was that he wasn't in his prime. He only had less than 60% of his full strength right now. Fortunately, Nanjing was formidable, and that was why they could fight these 11 experts. Bang! Suddenly, an explosion resounded and a figure was blasted backward repeatedly. It was Yang Yi. Yang Yi was pushed over 10 kilometers back, and a wisp of blood seeped out the corner of his mouth once he stopped himself. Meanwhile, Nanjing was instantly besieged. Bang! 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 And Nanjing was pushed back repeatedly. Obviously, they'd focused their attacks on Yang Yi to deal with her first. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. Boom! A moment later, a terrifying aura appeared. The 11 demon guard looked toward Yang Yi, and they saw him completely blood-red. At this moment, the sword intent he was emanating was a few levels greater than before. The demonic sword Dao. At the instant he chose to use the demonic sword Dao, his sword intent and slaughter intent rose by a few levels. This sword Dao was an extreme type of the sword Dao. At the very least, based on its current strength, it was much stronger than his usual sword Dao. When they noticed the change in Yang Yi, the 11 demon guards seemed like they were facing a formidable opponent. Suddenly, a ray of blood-red sword energy flashed. One of the 11's expression changed drastically, and he stabbed his pike forward. Had put practically all his strength into this attack. Meanwhile, Yang Yi's sword arrived. Hiss! As soon as the sword and pike came into contact, the pike was sliced open by Yang Yi's sword. The demon guard behind the pike was horrified and hurriedly shot backward. At the same time, a black sword suddenly shot out from the sword gourd on Yang Yi's waist. Hiss! The demon guard was instantly sliced into two. Blood sprayed. The others, who were about to attack, immediately retreated upon witnessing this. They weren't cowards, but they still felt quite fearful as they gazed at him right now. He really didn't seem normal at all. Yang Yi walked over to Nanjing and glanced at her. His face was still icy cold, but there was concern in his eyes. Are you all right? And Nanjing shook her head. Yang Yi gazed at the 10 remaining demon guards. Only 10 of you are left. 10. They stared at Yang Yi. They'd lost 2 of their members until now, and both had been instantly killed by a single attack from Yang Yi. Instant kills. Suddenly, Yang Yi vanished on the spot, and a ray of blood-red sword energy flashed. Their expressions changed drastically, and one of them shot backward. The rest shot backward as well. None of them dared to go head-on against this attack. Yang Yi stopped because they had gone over 10 kilometers away. He looked up at them. Are you going to fight or not? They stared at Yang Yi, and one of them stepped forward with the intent to attack. However, they seemed to have received some sort of order at this moment and retreated. A moment later, all of them vanished from Yang Yi and Nanjing's fields of vision. They'd left. Yang Yi returned to normal, but his entire body suddenly cracked open and blood seeped out from him. Nanjing walked over to Yang Yi. She gazed at him and asked, Is it very serious? Yang Yi shook his head. Not really. The repeated battles and especially entering the demonic sword Dao to forcefully annihilate one of them had caused an excessive burden on his body. In the end, it was because Tsung Mo's self-detonation had injured him too severely. And Nanjing suddenly said, You head inside and rest. I'll stand on guard. Yang Yi gazed at her and spoke softly. No matter what I've done throughout these years, you've always stayed by my side and helped me. I'm sorry for putting you through all of this. And Nanjing shook her head. You don't have to say anything like that. Yang Yi smiled. Right. Calm. Yang Yi returned to the primordial pagoda while Nanjing just stood outside with dagger-axe in her grasp. In the primordial pagoda, Yang Yi went to the cultivation room. His goal was to recover quickly. Of course, with the help of snowy and primordial violet energy, so long as he wasn't dead, recovery was just a matter of time. Meanwhile, the battle at a distant part of the starry sky was still going on. Qibitian was fighting the shadow. While it was just a shadow, it was extremely formidable. Even Qibitian could only fight it equally. But 2 and the others were completely suppressing the demon beasts. Suppression. Utter suppression. Bang! Suddenly, Qibitian shot backward repeatedly, and she was pushed extremely far away. 2 and the others looked up. The demon beast immediately retreated and created space between them and Tusk group. The shadow retreated to the demon beasts as well. The shadow gazed at Qibitian and the others for a long time, and then it led the demon beasts away. Tianxiu was about to attack, but Qibitian stopped her. We can't kill them! Just like that, the shadow and the demon beasts retreated. A short while later, they had vanished from Qibitian and the others' vision. The surroundings fell silent. Meanwhile, Tu took a large gulp of wine and said, "Time to go." She turned around and walked off. Yang Busi suddenly obstructed her path, and the latter cracked a smile. "If you haven't had enough, that's fine. We can continue." Tu charged at her. Yang Busi naturally refused to display weakness and charged at Tu too. Chi Bitian and Tianxiu glanced at them, and then they shook their heads and left. Their objective was the distant four-dimensional universe. The two shot through space. Chi Bitian suddenly said, "That fellow was very strong." Tianxiu nodded. "Those demons were very strong too. The three-dimensional universe is no match for them." Chi Bitian spoke softly. "I'm afraid we may never return after this. So why don't we meet that fellow before we go?" Tianxiu shook her head. "It isn't necessary?" Chi Bitian smiled. "Why?" Tianxiu replied softly. "I don't like being sentimental." Chi Bitian roared with laughter. A short while later, they gradually vanished into the distance. Their objective was the four-dimensional universe. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2775, Conquer Her. Yang Busi and Tu were still fighting. Both of them were actually equally matched, so it was impossible to decide on a victor in a short amount of time. However, they showed no signs of stopping. In the primordial pagoda, Yan Ye's injuries had practically healed. Moreover, he felt that his strength had improved slightly. Every life and death battle allowed him to improve tremendously. It was an improvement in all aspects. Now, he needed battles the most. The more intense they were, the stronger he would become. Of course, they may kill him too. Yan Yi left the cultivation room and arrived at the ascension platform. Snowy wasn't there. Yan Ye's divine sense swept the surroundings, and then he sensed Snowy. Snowy was in the primal true dragon's territory, and she seemed to be helping it grow stronger. Yan Yi shook his head and smiled, and then he placed Heaven's shield and the fragments of armor on the ascension platform before leaving the primordial pagoda. Outside the primordial pagoda, Yan Yi appeared beside a Nanjing. He looked into the distance. It was extremely calm and still. A Nanjing spoke softly. "They won't stop." Yan Yi nodded. "Then let them come." A Nanjing gazed at Yan Yi. "Shall we kill our way there?" Yan Yi shook his head. "We have to take precautions against those fellows from the End World too. If the Nanjing and him killed their way there, and the group from the End World went to Universe City during their absence, then Universe City would have no way to defend itself against the mysterious experts group. Universe City only had a chance of fighting them when they had someone to keep the mysterious expert busy. Otherwise, just the mysterious expert alone was enough to crush Universe City." A Nanjing asked. "What about Area?" "Area?" Yan Yi slowly tightened his grip on his sword sheath, and a wisp of worry flashed through his eyes. Now, Area could be considered as the evil beast of the past. Her strength was naturally beyond doubt. Even then, he was still very worried. However, he couldn't go looking for her right now. Yan Yi fell silent for a short while, and then he withdrew a transmission stone. A moment later, Ding Xiaoyou's voice came from the other side. "What is it?" Yan Yi replied softly. "Send people to search for Area. If they find her, don't get close to her or offend her. Just notify me." Ding Xiaoyou fell silent for a short while and said, "All right." Yan Yi put the transmission stone away and gazed at a Nanjing. "Stay here. I'm going to look for someone." A Nanjing asked. "Who?" Yan Yi replied. "The woman in black." And Nanjing nodded and didn't say anything else. Yan Yi spoke softly. "If the forces of the four-dimensional universe arrive, contact me immediately. Besides that, if anything unexpected happens, don't try to deal with it on your own. Retreat to Universe City." She nodded. Yang Yi didn't say anything else and just vanished on the spot with the help of Great Unknown. And Nanjing looked ahead and sat on Yang Yi's chair. She just sat there with her eyes closed. Yang Yi was gone, so she was the first line of defense for the three-dimensional universe now. Not long after Yang Yi left, a figure appeared nearby. And Nanjing gazed at the figure, and the figure said, "Are you willing to leave with me?" It was the mortal emperor who had taken Sky Maiden. Of course, he wasn't the first mortal emperor. And Nanjing noticed that he didn't carry any hostility toward her, so Dagger Axe stopped trembling and calmed down. She shook her head. The mortal emperor said, "The three-dimensional universe is bound to fall." And Nanjing glanced at the mortal emperor. "The three-dimensional universe has nothing to do with me." The mortal emperor was quite puzzled. "Since it has nothing to do with you, then why stand on guard here and fight the four-dimensional universe, that mysterious expert, and destiny?" And Nanjing replied indifferently, "I go where he goes." She closed her eyes as she spoke. The mortal emperor fell silent for a long time, and then he said, "I see. His sword Dao is the sword Dao of emotion, and you possess the martial Dao of emotion. However, your emotions are only limited to him. Did the emotions come first, or did the emotions come for the martial Dao?" And Nanjing glanced at him. "I'm not interested in chatting with you. You can leave now." She closed her eyes and seemed to enter a state of meditation. The mortal emperor fell silent for a short while, and then his figure gradually turned ethereal. A moment later, head vanished completely. And Nanjing remained still like a mountain. After the mortal emperor left, he shot toward a point in space, but it didn't take long for him to stop. A man had appeared before him. It was Yang Yi. Yang Yi gazed at the mortal emperor in silence. The mortal emperor said, "Long time no see. You've grown stronger again." Yang Yi asked, "What do you seek?" The mortal emperor shook his head. "Don't worry, I don't seek your sprite progenitor, nor do I want the three-dimensional universe." Yang Yi pondered deeply for a moment and said, "You're part of the three-dimensional universe too." The mortal emperor smiled. "You want me to protect this universe with you?" Yang Yi nodded. "I do. But it looks like that won't happen." The mortal emperor said, "Yang Yi, have you ever considered that protecting the three-dimensional universe is beyond you?" Yang Yi asked, "Why do you say that?" The mortal emperor chuckled. "It isn't the end world's mysterious expert, or the four-dimensional universe that want the three-dimensional universe, it's destiny. The strongest form of destiny. Protecting the three-dimensional universe is no different than going against her. Allow me to be honest, you don't have the strength to resist her." Yang Yi shook his head. "Her objective is snowy and area." The mortal emperor smiled. "Abandon them, get far away from this place, and the world will be yours in the future." Yang Yi smiled. "Once I lose them, even the best future would be meaningless to me." The mortal emperor nodded slightly. "It's your choice." He turned around and was about to leave. Yang Yi asked, "Is my eldest sister well?" The mortal emperor stopped. "She is. However, if you seek her help, her future may not be that good. I'm just being frank. You're in a worse situation than you were in a while ago, and I don't want her to get mixed up in it. I can be considered to be an ancestor of hers, and she's the only outstanding one among my descendants." Yang Yi spoke softly. "All that matters is that she's doing well. As for the three-dimensional universe, I'll deal with it myself." The mortal emperor said, "Take care." He vanished on the spot once he finished speaking. Yang Yi left as well. Meanwhile, the mortal emperor was traveling through space when a mysterious figure suddenly appeared before him. It was the mysterious expert of the end world. The mortal emperor chuckled. "What? When did I become a target of yours?" The mysterious expert said, "You're the second mortal emperor." The mortal emperor nodded. The mysterious expert said, "Are you willing to follow me?" The mortal emperor shook his head. "While I'm inferior to my father, I can't bring shame to him." "Don't you think so too?" The mysterious expert replied. "You know who I am." The mortal emperor smiled. "My father fought you so many times, so how could I not know about you?" The mysterious expert crossed his arms before himself. The mortal emperor said, "Allow me to be honest, that woman is a god, and no one can fight her. Even if all the geniuses of my father's era were to come back from the dead and join forces, they still wouldn't be a match for her." The mysterious expert shook his head. "You don't understand." The mortal emperor smiled. "Please do tell." The mysterious expert replied, "You're inferior to your father." He turned around and left. The mortal emperor suddenly vanished on the spot, and a wave of golden light appeared behind the mysterious expert. The latter stopped and lightly clenched his crossed fists. Boom! A wave of powerful energy rippled out of him, and it instantly obliterated the golden energy while the mortal emperor returned to where had been a moment ago. The mysterious expert shook his head. "Mortal emperor, your father led the human race to fight against this world and all the races in it, and he even dared to refuse the destiny of that time. Even if he died, he was respected by all." Calm, he vanished into the distance once he finished speaking. Mortal emperor remained silent on the spot. Many, many years ago, the human race had a mortal emperor, his father. That time could be said to be the greatest days of glory for the human race, and all the other races feared the human race of that time. Of course, just like the other geniuses, even someone who was strong like a god, the mortal emperor was still suppressed by that woman. At that time, there were countless monstrous experts, but no matter how monstrous they were, meeting that woman would be the last thing they did in life. Destiny annihilated the heaven Tao of the three-dimensional universe and suppressed all the experts that came after. She was the one who stood above the clouds. The mortal emperor closed his eyes slowly. A long time later he shook his head. "My father was too foolish. He died for the human race, but does anyone in the human race even remember him now?" He vanished on the spot once he finished speaking. Meanwhile, Yang Yi was traveling through space with Great Unknown. His objective was to locate the woman in black. That irritable woman in black. There were things he wanted to figure out. A long time later, Yang Yi suddenly stopped because Great Unknown had started to tremble. A moment later, the space before him cracked open, and then a woman in a pitch-black dress walked out from there. She was covered in injuries. Obviously, she had just experienced a fierce battle. It was the woman in black. Yang Yi frowned upon catching sight of her. "What happened to you?" "Huh!" Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Are you talking to me?" Yang Yi knew she was furious. Sure enough, she charged at him. Yang Yi laughed bitterly and took a punch of hers. Bam! Yang Yi was pushed over 1 kilometer away. However, he was quite happy because she hadn't been too hard on him. She spoke coldly. "Let's get to the point. What are you doing here?" Yang Yi walked over to her and said, "Your strongest form isn't very friendly." She fell silent. Yang Yi cracked a smile. "Give me some guidance." She glanced at him. "Do you think you're handsome?" Yang Yi was stunned for a moment, and then he spoke slightly, shyly. "You Haha, it's obvious to everyone." She spoke indifferently. "Since you think you're really handsome, then go conquer her. Once you get her, all your problems will be resolved." Yang Yi was stunned speechless. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2776, Me, but not me. Yang Yi was quite stunned. What the heck is she saying? But she didn't say anything else and just walked away. Yang Yi was shocked. "You're just leaving?" She stopped, fell silent for a long time, and then said, "What else?" Yang Yi replied solemnly, "Will you merge with her in the future?" Merge? He didn't want that to happen at all. He had quite the good impression of this woman in black and the woman in white, and he didn't want to fight them. She shook her head. "All of that depends on her." She gazed at Yang Yi and continued, "Do your best to stop her." Yang Yi replied solemnly, "Do you know what she's up to?" The woman in black replied indifferently. Do you really want me to tell you? Yang Yi replied. You can't? She said. If I do, both of us will die right now. Yang Yi was at a loss for words. She walked over to Yang Yi. She's very conceited. Of course, she has the strength to back it up, and that's your opportunity. The woman in black turned around and walked away. Suddenly, Great Unknown shot forward and arrived before her. She spoke softly. Do you still need it? Yang Yi shook his head. She nodded. Am taking it then. She sliced open space in front of her with Great Unknown and vanished from Yang Yi's field of vision. Yang Yi fell silent on the spot. Based on what she said, Yang Yi knew that she and the others were already aware of their strongest form's plans. Moreover, they wanted him to stop her. Because they may merge with her in the future, and at that time, they wouldn't be themselves anymore. That was why they'd chosen someone. A short while later, Yang Yi turned around and left. He knew that they'd helped as much as they could. Now, he had to rely on himself. Yang Yi shot through the boundless reaches of space on his sword. Meanwhile, the transmission stone in his pocket trembled, and then Ding Xiaoyou's voice came from it. We've found Area. However, we dare not approach her. She isn't the same Area she was. Area? Yang Yi hurriedly asked. Where is she? Ding Xiaoyou replied softly. She seems to be pursuing someone, and it looks like she's injured. Yang Yi's face fell. Tell me where she is. A moment later, Yang Yi vanished into the starry sky. An hour later, Yang Yi arrived at the location Ding Xiaoyou had told him about. However, besides cracked open space, there was nothing here. There had been a battle here, and it hadn't been long since it ended. Yang Yi glanced at the surroundings, and then his expression changed slightly before he shot swiftly ahead. Around 15 minutes later, he noticed something tearing open space in the distance. Area's aura! Yang Yi's face instantly became solemn when he sensed her aura. Vicious! The viciousness she emanated right now was much stronger than before. Meanwhile, Area suddenly stopped and gazed at Yang Yi, and her eyes were dark red. They were a gorgeous red. Yang Yi stopped and didn't dare to get too close to her. Area stared at him, and then she suddenly slammed a punch at him from afar. Bang! A fist flashed, and a pitch-black spatial rift appeared before Yang Yi. Yang Yi drew his sword and slashed. Bang! Yang Yi was pushed back repeatedly until he arrived over 3 kilometers away. Yang Yi gazed at his right hand once he stopped himself, and it was trembling uncontrollably. Yang Yi was shocked because she was much stronger than she'd been that day. Suddenly, Area vanished on the spot, and then Yang Yi sensed a powerful aura sweep toward him. It was so strong it felt like a tsunami that was about to suffocate him. Yang Yi closed his eyes and sheathed his sword. An instant later, he stomped his right foot down, soared up into the air, and swung his sword. Bang! Yang Yi's sword instantly obliterated Area's aura. Meanwhile, a small fist slammed against the sword precursor. Boom! Yang Yi was instantly blasted far away. Yang Yi stopped, and a strand of blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Area was about to attack again when Yang Yi suddenly withdrew her horns, and then Area stopped just 30 m away from him. Her gaze descended on those horns. Yang Yi wiped off the blood on the corner of his mouth and said, Area, do you still remember me? Area stared at those horns. A long time passed before she glanced coldly at Yang Yi and slammed a punch forward. Boom! The space before her was instantly blasted into bits. Yang Yi was blasted backward repeatedly, but Area didn't attack again and just left. Yang Yi roared with fury. Area! Area's figure paused for a moment, but just a moment later, she sped up and vanished into the starry sky. Yang Yi closed his eyes slowly. She recognized those horns, but she didn't seem to recognize him. Yang Yi stood there silently for a very long time, and then he turned around and left. Somewhere in the clouds, a woman gazed at the go board before her, and seemed like she was in deep thought. A long time passed before she shook her head slightly. All of you've really disappointed me. Meanwhile, a shadow appeared on the chair before her, and it just sat there. The shadow didn't speak and just placed a black piece on the board. The woman grinned. Interesting. The game is actually getting a little interesting. I underestimated you, just a little, the shadow said. Your other forms are causing trouble for me. She smiled. That's your problem, the shadow said. I can kill them? She chuckled. So long as you can, feel free to do so. The shadow fell silent for a long time and said, They are you too, she replied. They are me, but not me. Of course, it depends on me. The shadow spoke softly. Since you've said that, I'll kill them then. She smiled and remained silent. Allow me to be frank, you probably can't kill them without your main body. Actually, you can use your main body. I've told you that I won't kill you. So, what are you afraid of? The shadow fell silent, and then it raised a piece and placed it down. She glanced at the board and smiled. I see, so you have something up your sleeve. The shadow gradually vanished. She gazed at Justice and smiled. Don't worry, your howl will resound through the 3-dimensional universe and 4-dimensional universe soon, and you will be the final sword howl. As she spoke, she walked over to the nearby tree and looked up in silence. No one knew what she was thinking. Meanwhile, at an unknown pitch-black hole in space, a dark figure suddenly appeared there. The dark figure just stood there while seeming to be waiting for something. The mysterious expert. The dark shadow was the mysterious expert from the end world. Not long after, a shadow soundlessly condensed into form nearby. The mysterious expert asked, What is that woman planning? The shadow replied indifferently, What do you think? The mysterious expert replied, What about you? What does your 4-dimensional universe want? The shadow replied, The same thing you want. The mysterious expert fell silent for a short while and said, She wants the good sprite and evil beast. We can't let her have them. The shadow replied, If she takes action now, no one can stop her. The mysterious expert shook his head. Since she isn't trying to get them now, it means the time for that hasn't come. We must get the good sprite and evil beast before then. Even if we can't obtain them, we must eliminate them. The shadow said, Those women are quite troublesome. The mysterious expert replied, I'll keep them busy. They'll leave Yang Yi to you, all right? The shadow fell silent for a short while and said, All right. The mysterious expert turned around and left. A short while later, the shadow vanished as well. After the mysterious expert left the black hole, he waved his right hand, and the space before him cracked open. A moment later, he entered the crack, and then he appeared in another part of the starry sky. Zwenmu and the others were here. Something worth mentioning was that Shu Wubian was here too. The mysterious expert pulled his hands in opposite directions, and then a huge teleportation formation appeared beneath them. A moment later, he activated it, and then they vanished on the spot. At another part of the starry sky, Qi Bitian and Tian Xiu stopped abruptly. The space before them had started to tremble violently. A moment later, a group appeared before them. It was the mysterious experts group. Qi Bitian glanced at them. They aren't from the 4-dimensional universe. The mysterious expert didn't say anything, and he just tossed something forward. A moment later, it shook violently, and then exploded. In an instant, a barrier of light appeared in the surroundings. It was fully made of pitch-black threads. The barrier of light had locked off this part of space. Qi Bitian's eyes narrowed slightly. They're trying to trap us. We aren't their target, and it's probably someone else who's gone to deal with that kid. Tian Xiu nodded slightly. Which one of us is staying behind? Qi Bitian glanced at the mysterious experts group. I'm afraid none of us will be leaving. However, I still plan to try. You go. Tian Xiu didn't waste her breath and just shot off into the distance. Bang! A flame suddenly appeared before her, and then jets of flame shot at Tian Xiu. Tian Xiu's eyes narrowed slightly as she raised both her palms. Omni Ruin! In an instant, the flames before her started to disperse. Tian Xiu didn't attack again and continued forward. However, an afterimage suddenly flashed. Bang! An explosion resounded, and then Tianxiu returned to where she'd been a while ago. The mysterious expert was in front of her. The mysterious expert crossed his arms before his chest. No one can save him now! If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 2777 The Battle Breaks Out. Chapter 2777 The Battle Breaks Out. Tianxiu gazed coldly at the mysterious expert, and then she vanished on the spot. The mysterious expert pressed his right palm forward. Bang! Space shook violently, and then Tianxiu was back where she'd been a moment ago. She looked down at her palm, and it was covered in cracks. Tianxiu gazed at the mysterious expert, and then she vanished again. Meanwhile, Qi vanished as well. She shot up into the air, but it only took a moment for a mysterious flame to soundlessly appear. A vicious glow flashed through her eyes. Her right hand formed into a claw as she swiped upward. Sky Claw! The flame instantly exploded apart, and the area turned into an ocean of flames. In the ocean, a huge fire serpent kept slamming itself at Qi. However, Omni Phantom was blasted away repeatedly. Shu Bian spoke coldly. The Omni Phantom is no match for her. Let's attack together. As soon as she said that, Swimu and the others charged up into the air. They were ganging up on her. Just like that, Qi and Tianxiu were kept busy. During this time, Tianxiu had wanted to charge off on many occasions, but the mysterious expert kept stopping her. At this moment, even Tianxiu was furious. Bang! 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 The battle grew increasingly intense. Meanwhile, Tu and Yang Busi were still fighting, and they had been fighting for a long time now. Meanwhile, a few mysterious auras were watching them from afar. While they sensed those auras, the two of them ignored the auras. They were in the heat of the battle. See, once he left area, Yang Yi swiftly returned to Nanjing. Fortunately, nothing had occurred. Nanjing spoke softly. It's too quiet. Yang Yi nodded. The quieter it is, the more unusual it is. Nanjing looked off into the distance. Something big might be about to happen. Yang Yi nodded. He was about to speak when ripples came from afar. Yang Yi frowned slightly and tightened his grip on his sword sheath. A moment later they watched as 4 huge beasts appeared from that point in space. Pantheras. There were around 12 experts with pike on the 4 beasts. All of them were huge like giants. A shadow led the group. A shadow whose appearance was indiscernible. Yang Yi spoke softly. Their leader is here. And Nanjing nodded. A moment later, the shadow stopped around 300 m away from them, and the 4 beasts stared at Yang Yi and Nanjing ferociously. Yang Yi glanced at the beasts for a moment before moving his gaze to the shadow. What should I call you? The shadow shook its head. That isn't important. Yang Yi, do you realize the situation you're in? Yang Yi nodded. I do. The shadow said. You aren't my target. If both of you leave, we won't stop you. That's my display of sincerity to you. Yang Yi smiled. If you leave, the 2 of us won't stop you too. What do you think? The shadow shook its head slightly. Looks like we're at an impasse. As soon as he said that, one of the beasts pounced at Yang Yi and Nanjing. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. The beast's physical strength was terrifying, and perhaps only area could truly suppress it. Yang Yi restrained his thoughts, exchanged glances with Nanjing, and then they vanished on the spot. Bang! The Panthera was blasted away. Suddenly, the shadow vanished on the spot. Yang Yi swiftly drew his sword while Nanjing stabbed her spear forward. Meanwhile, the shadow was in front of them. There were 2 strange black vortices in his palms, and these vortices instantly expanded and exploded upon coming into contact with Nanjing's spear. Boom! Nanjing and Yang Yi were pushed backward repeatedly. And as soon as they stopped themselves, Around a dozen pikes tore through space and rained down upon them. Yang Yi drew his sword and swung it repeatedly. Meanwhile, a Nanjing waved her spear. A moment later, the pikes before them had been knocked away. However, the shadow appeared before them again. As for those four beasts, they'd gone off in the three-dimensional universe's direction. Obviously, the shadow was trying to keep Yang Yi and Nanjing busy here. Yang Yi and Nanjing had realized the shadow's intentions. So, they didn't allow themselves to get caught in battle here and retreated as they fought. Those beasts were extremely formidable, so Universe City wouldn't be able to resist them without Yang Yi and Nanjing. Universe City. Ding Xiaoyao led a group out into the sky. At this moment, the space there was trembling, and a wave of invisible pressure was rippling down from above. The trembling in space gradually started to grow intense. Meanwhile, Ding Xiaoyao gazed at the old man, Qindozi, who was by her side. Qindozi nodded slightly. "It's ready." Ding Xiaoyao nodded. "Prepare yourselves." All of them stared at that point in space. They knew that this was their real first battle, and it may be their last. No one wanted to die, but they had no choice but to fight at a time like this. They had no way out of this. A short while later, the space there cracked open, and then a colossus emerged from it. A panthera. Moreover, there were three more behind it. In an instant, four pantheras appeared in the sky above the city. The pantheras looked down below, and then they dived down at the city. Based on their strength, Universe City would be instantly obliterated if they were allowed to enter the city. Qindozi suddenly raised his right hand and lowered it gently. Bang! Suddenly, a huge pillar of light surged up into the air from within the city. The beast that led the charge was instantly blasted far away. Everyone heaved sighs of relief when they witnessed this. It worked! A moment later, another pillar of light surged up from Universe City. The second panthera was clearly prepared and slammed its claws at the pillar. Bang! The entire pillar of light shook violently, but the panthera was blasted away. Pillar after pillar of light surged up into the air from within the city. Bang! Bang! The other two pantheras were blasted away as well. In an instant, all four of them had been pushed back. Meanwhile, Yang Yi and Nanjing were still in battle in outer space, and the battle was growing increasingly intense. While both of them were formidable, they were up against the joint forces of around a dozen demon guards and the shadow. Especially the shadow. Its strength far surpassed Yang Yi and Nanjing's expectations. In the city, a black-clothed figure suddenly appeared before Ding Xiaoyao. It whispered a few words to her and moved aside. Ding Xiaoyao pondered deeply for a moment and looked up. They are fighting out there. Destiny Realm experts, come with me! She vanished into the sky. Jian Woody and the others didn't hesitate to shoot up into the air. A short while later, all the Destiny Realm experts in the city had vanished. In the starry sky. Boom! Boom! Along with two explosions, Nanjing and Yang Yi were pushed back repeatedly. But just a moment later, Yang Yi charged forward and swung his sword, and Nanjing was by his side. A moment later, a ray of sword energy and a spear image appeared here. Boom! The shadow was pushed around 300 m back. Meanwhile, a black sword suddenly shot through the throat of a demon guard. Hiss! That expert's head instantly shot up into the air. Blood sprayed. The others were shocked by the sight of this and retreated to the shadow's side. At this moment, they noticed to their shock that if they didn't have the shadow to keep Yang Yi and Nanjing busy, they may be annihilated in an instant. The shadow suddenly said, "That flying sword of yours is quite extraordinary." He suddenly raised his right hand once he finished speaking. Bang! A pitch-black fist suddenly descended from above Yang Yi and Nanjing. At the same time, the shadow vanished on the spot. Nanjing shot up into the air while Yang Yi dashed forward and swung his sword. Hiss! Space was sliced open before his sword. However, two black hands clamped down onto his sword. Swish! Countless strands of sword energy swept out of Yang Yi. The sword domain sphere. At the instant Yang Yi activated the sword domain sphere, The shadow shuddered and turned ethereal. Yan Yes' eyes narrowed and swiftly swung a horizontal slash. Meanwhile, a palm passed through his defenses and struck his chest. Bam! An explosion resounded, and Yan Yi was pushed backward repeatedly. However, the black hand before his chest was still there, and it was ceaselessly destroying his body. At this moment, Yan Yi decisively released his sword and slammed both his hands forward. Bang! An afterimage flashed backward repeatedly. Meanwhile, Yan Yi stopped, and 2 streams of blood seeped out from the corners of his mouth. The shadow was about to attack again when a few dozen auras shot up from below, and then around 30 experts appeared behind Yan Yi and in Nanjing. It was Jian Woody and the others. Both sides were in confrontation. Chapter 2778 will go first. Chapter 2778 will go first. Based on what could be seen on the surface, Yan Yes' side had the absolute advantage. After all, they had around 30 Destiny Realm experts and both Yan Yi and in Nanjing. Such a force may not be the strongest in this world, but it wasn't very weak. However, the shadow had no intention to retreat. Meanwhile, the 4 Pantheras appeared above them again. While the formation had pushed them back, it hadn't been able to kill them. One of the Pantheras seems to have received some kind of order, and it dived down toward Yan Yes' group. A ray of sword energy shot up into the air. Jian Woody. Besides Yan Yi and in Nanjing, he was undoubtedly the strongest in Universe City. Meanwhile, the others went with him. The shadow, on the other hand, was left to Yan Yi and in Nanjing. And Nanjing was about to attack when Yan Yi suddenly stopped her. She looked at him, and he said, "Go help them." She frowned slightly and felt bewildered. The shadow's strength wasn't something Yan Yi could go against on his own. Yan Yi said, "If you help them, the battle can be ended as quickly as possible." And Nanjing pondered deeply for a moment, and vanished into the distance. In the end, she chose to trust Yan Yi. Just as Yan Yi had said, if the shadow were to keep Yan Yi and her busy here, this battle wouldn't end for some time. But if she went to help them, Jian Woody and the others would be able to crush the 4 Pantheras and those demon guards as soon as possible. Of course, it all depended on whether Yan Yi could keep the shadow busy. The shadow said, "Are you going to use your ultimate moves now?" Yan Yi didn't say a word. His sword intent and aura suddenly rose explosively, and even his slaughter intent appeared around him. The demonic sword Dao. The shadow nodded slightly. "That's quite interesting indeed." He vanished on the spot once he finished speaking. Swish! Space rippled, and an afterimage shot at Yan Yi. Yan Yi slowly grabbed the sword precursor in his right hand, and then he swung it. However, such a shocking attack was stopped by 2 hands. Suddenly, a ray of dazzling sword energy erupted from the sword gourd on Yan Yes' waist, and then a black sword shot forward. The shadow twisted its body sideways to dodge the flying sword while simultaneously slamming Yan Yes' sword forward. Bang! Yan Yi was pushed backward repeatedly. The shadow was about to attack again, but a flying sword shot at it from behind. It was Burial! The shadow stopped, turned around, and slammed a punch at it. Bam! Burial was blasted away. At the instant the shadow had turned around, a sword slashed down from above him. The shadow didn't try to dodge and just allowed the sword to descend. Hiss! Yan Yi's sword slashed the shadow into bits. However, Yan Yi was alarmed instead and swiftly swept his sword to the side. Bang! Yan Yi felt a wave of powerful force sweep through his entire body. Bang! Yan Yi was blasted extremely far away, and as soon as he stopped himself, afterimages soundlessly appeared before him. Yan Yi closed his eyes. The shadow was too fast. Too much faster than him. So, it was impossible for him to see with his eyes. He had to use his heart. Suddenly, a sword shot out from Yan Yi's waist and slashed at the afterimage before Yan Yi, but just a moment later, Burial stopped as 2 fingers had clamped down on it. Burial couldn't move an inch forward before those fingers. However, Yang Yi suddenly vanished on the spot. A blood-red ray of sword energy shot down from above. The fingers released burial, and then a pinch slammed against the blood-red sword energy. Bang! The blood-red sword energy exploded into bits, but just a moment later, another ray of blood-red sword energy descended. The explosive madness sword technique. At this moment, Yang Yi's aura and strength arrived at his peak. Rumble! The afterimage was pushed back repeatedly. In just an instant, had been pushed over 1 kilometer away. However, Yang Yi's attacks were growing stronger with every swing. It was the first time Yang Yi had turned the tides and started to suppress the shadow instead. Meanwhile, the 4 Pantheras and the demon guards were completely suppressed once Nanjing joined the battle. One of the Pantheras was covered in injuries and was on the verge of death. The shadow had clearly realized this. Suddenly, Yang Yi's sword missed its target as the shadow before him was gone. At the same time, 3 shadows appeared around him. 3. These 3 shadows suddenly vanished simultaneously. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly as he swept his sword forward. Hiss! A blood-red wave of sword energy rippled out, but in just a moment, the blood-red sword energy shattered. A moment later, a palm had pressed down on Yang Yi's chest. Bang! Yang Yi was instantly blasted 30 kilometers away. As soon as he stopped himself, an afterimage slammed down at it from above. Yang Yi hurriedly raised his sword and slashed at it. Meanwhile, a hand grabbed his sword. At the same time, Yang Yi decisively released his sword and slammed his arms upward. Bang! The afterimage was blasted 300 m away. Heaven's shield was on Yang Yi's arms. At this moment, countless strands of blood surged into Heaven's shield, and its strength rose crazily. Yang Yi stretched out his hand and the sword precursor appeared in his grasp once more. This time, he was using Heaven's shield and the sword precursor. The shadow said, "You have quite a few trump cards, and I." Suddenly, a shrill cry resounded from afar. The shadow looked over, and he saw a panthera was falling from the sky. There was a woman standing on its head. Nanjing! Nanjing glanced coldly at the shadow, and then she charged at another panthera. Besides that, around 5 of the demon guards had fallen in battle. It could be said that the shadow's side had completely lost. The shadow fell silent for a moment, and then he looked up at Yang Yi. A moment later, his body suddenly started trembling violently. Yang Yi's eyes narrowed slightly. He knew that this may be the shadow's final attack. If he could resist it, his side would win, and if he failed, the situation would be instantly turned around. A pitch-black pike suddenly appeared in the shadow's grasp, and then it shot at Yang Yi. The pike was spinning, and space exploded apart inch by inch in its wake. Yang Yi didn't try to defend himself, and he just swung his sword at the pike instead. A moment later, the sword precursor struck the pick, and they instantly cracked open. At the same time, a flying sword shot forward from Yang Yi's waist. Bam! The pike was instantly blasted into bits. Yang Yi sheathed the sword precursor and grabbed burial before swinging it forward. Bang! The shadow didn't go head-on against this attack and just retreated instead. He retreated over 10 kilometers back and created a huge amount of distance between them. Because the pantheras and demon guards were being pushed back. If this battle continued, all of them would die. The shadow vanished on the spot. And Nanjing and the others immediately retreated upon noticing that. Both sides created space between each other and stood in confrontation from afar. Yang Yi glanced at the shadow. "Fuck off!" The shadow shook his head slightly. "How could that happen?" The space around them suddenly shook violently, and then numerous powerful auras rippled out from there. The expressions of everyone here became solemn upon noticing this. Yang Yi suddenly ordered, "Retreat to the city." They nodded and retreated while Yang Yi and Nanjing guarded the rear. A short while later, Jianwudi and the others had returned to the city. Yang Yi and Nanjing were retreating too. For some reason, the shadow didn't stop them. A long time passed before the space around him cracked open, and then numerous huge demon beasts emerged. There were pantheras among them, but there were other demon beasts of unknown name as well. Besides that, there were more experts with pikes. A moment later, these colossi covered the sky above Universe City. A wave of invisible pressure enveloped the entire city. Countless looked up at them from within the city. Is this the final battle? Meanwhile, a shadow suddenly appeared in the air above the city. The shadow looked down below and said, "Our target is Yang Yi. Hand him over and well leave. I'll give you 2 hours to consider my proposal. After that, well crush Universe City if you don't hand over Yang Yi." In the city, Yang Yi glanced coldly at the sky and led the others back into the hall. The atmosphere in the hall was very heavy. Yang Yi glanced at the others. "What do all of you think?" Ding Xiaoyao remained silent. It wasn't the right time for her to speak. Meanwhile, Lu Yuan suddenly said, "Well, fight them, of course. I'm sure no one would believe his nonsense, right?" Huan Ying nodded. "Handing over Brother Yang would be no different than digging our own graves. Because we would be ripe for the slaughter once that happens, and they can do with us as they please." The others nodded. The shadow was clearly trying to divide them. If they really believed him, they would die before they even knew it. Meanwhile, an old man gazed at Yang Yi. "City Governor, just tell us what we should do. This time, one side has to die." Yang Yi glanced at them and said, "Senior Chun." Qindozi stepped forward. Yang Yi gazed at him. "Is the formation ready?" Qindozi nodded. "Everything is ready." Yang Yi nodded slightly. "Let's go then. Well, make the first move." All of them were stunned speechless.